How blown out I am. Hold on a second. I had to switch lenses. And I am all sorts of... Let's see, we're in focus. That's too much. See, that's a mess. That feels better. Whatever, it's good enough for today. Hello, everyone. How are you? I am late, but I'm here. It's been a while since we did a Tuesday stream, so I am excited to be back. I'm trying out this standing position. We'll see if I can make it a full 3 hours in a standing position, but you know, we're going to do our best. What's up, Ryan? How you doing? What's up, Bridge? Yeah, so we're gonna just give this a shot. We're gonna see how the day goes. So I don't really have a full plan today. So I've got a few different directions that we can go. Might make this a bit of a choose your own adventure. I think maybe what's up, Terry? How you doing? I think we can go in a handful of directions. I think there's kind of an obvious easy way out, which would be let's make today kind of casual Q&A. If you've got questions, throw them at me. If you've got things you just want to talk about, careers, you want to talk about tech stuff, you want to talk about whatever, just hit me. Let's go. And then I also have a couple projects that I'm working on, like I'm redesigning my personal site. I could dig into that a little bit. Oh, it does still say how to build a game engine in TypeScript. That's not the right thing. Let's fix that. What are we doing today? You know what? Let's make a decision. Let's see. Let's start here and see how we go. And then let me see if I can, let me update these on the fly. I feel like it probably won't, right? Can't do it on... I don't know if it updated on... Did it update on Twitch and X? Because it definitely won't let me update on YouTube and LinkedIn while they're running. But that's okay. We're gonna live with it. That was a fun project, that TypeScript game, though. If you didn't see that episode, it was last Thursday. I had Will King on, and we built a game engine, which was super fun. My apologies, Goodman. We are not, in fact, doing a game today. We're doing something else. If you want to see the game, that was on Thursday. That was what we did there, and then we're going to do a part 2. Will and I are talking through scheduling there, so we'll have more information on that soon-ish. Okay, so I guess first and foremost, it has been several weeks since I've done one of these, and that is because we're getting back into full swing on production. So we've got a lot going on right now. We've got Leet Heat is in full swing. We're editing. We're going to get episode 4 out to supporters today. So if you are not currently a CodeTV supporter and you want to get, let me get this typed out, and you want to get access early to new content, we are dropping the next episode of Leet Heat today. That'll be available for about a week before it goes live on YouTube. If you are not a supporter, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube on Tuesday without a subscription. We're also filming Web Dev Challenge. So we've filmed 2 episodes so far. We did one on, what day was it? The 4th of March. We did one on the 11th of March. We're filming another one next week in Salt Lake City at Epic WebConf. If you're coming to Epic WebConf, let me know, say hi. And then we are also filming another one here in Portland on April 9th. Working on booking some more episodes there as well. So we will be doing a whole lot. There's going to be a lot going on this year. I'm very excited for that. That production schedule, of course, means that my live schedule gets a little wonky. So apologies for the inconsistency there. So let's see. Can I discuss my approach to planning out an app? Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the planning process, because I think that is a good topic. So I think the biggest thing for me whenever I'm planning out an app is trying to think about, you know, what's the target outcome? Like what makes it successful? Turn on the do not disturb. There we go. So what makes an app successful? Like what are the success conditions? And they're almost never technical, right? It's almost always activity based, right? If I'm building an app for, I don't know, let me pull something out of the air. Like I'm building an app for parents who coach their kids' rec leagues, right? Like you coach soccer, you coach baseball, whatever it is. Then you would perhaps want to manage whose turn it is to bring a snack for halftime, or who's bringing the orange wedges, or whatever it is. It's been a long time since I played Little League, but I remember my highlights were orange wedges and Capri Suns, right? And so the parents were on a rotation for that. And I need somebody to manage that. And I know that has historically been done with, you know, email or phone trees or things like that. It's kind of a pain. Everybody's got to be paying attention. A lot of times they're not. So could you build something that would make this easier? And maybe the outcome that you want is the coach has a really clear view of who's on deck to be the next like snack parent, and maybe it's got a the ability to send a reminder so that the parent who's in charge of bringing that snack gets a note the night before. Maybe because the outcome we're after is that the kids never go without one of those snacks, and that you as the coach never have to try to like scramble to get one of these covered on the day of a game. So all of that is the success criteria then are kind of outside of the technical realm. So then I would start thinking, you know, what are the things that are actually required for that to work? Well, we're going to need to know who all the parents are. We need to be able to contact them, ideally by whatever their preferred contact method is. So that might be email, phone, text, whatever. And we need some kind of a scheduling system so that we can keep track of when the games are, what the requirements are, who's signed up for what slot, what responsibility. And then we would need some kind of a like cron sort of thing that would let me know, okay, it's 3 days out from the game. Did you make sure that somebody was in that slot? It's 24 hours out from the game. Did you send the reminder? And then we can start making decisions about, you know, how does that work practically? Are we expecting all the parents to download this app? Probably not, right? So it's more likely that this is more of a dashboard for the coach, where the coach would then want to be they're getting the notes, but everything else is happening outside of the app. They're doing it in text or email or a phone call. So then then you kind of start thinking, okay, well, what does that mean from we know what we need technically, we know what we need from an outcomes perspective. And then I would start from there actually mapping this out. And so one of the things that I love for this is FigJam. Let me actually pull this up. Let's do this one here, and then we'll use this view. There we go. And so like once you get to this point, you might you say, let's go to FigJam. I guess we'll just open up Figma and then create a new FigJam. And in here, what I would then start doing is I'd start thinking about like, okay, we've got some requirements. So I can pull some sticky notes out here, and we can say like, you know, we need reminders, we need the parent info, we need schedule, right? So I can start kind of getting all these pieces put together. And then once I know kind of what my requirements are, and this is I'm going to go pretty rudimentary on this to not like waste a bunch of time. But then I can get my shapes and I start drawing a workflow, right? So it would be, you know, we have a couple, it would be like a parent intake, and then we would also need like a game creation, and then we would need some kind of like reminder workflow. And all of this is information that I can then take. So I would come down here, I'd say, okay, so the parent intake is I would need the coach, because this is all, again, like this is going to be an app that the coach uses. So the coach would, let's say, I don't know, maybe the coach gets, can do it manually at the game, right? And so they would say like manual entry at game. And that's like a form. And then another way that they could potentially do this would be maybe there's like an email intake, and that would be a form that they fill out that puts it's basically this form, but it's via email. So I can, you know, get the parent's email, send them a thing, and then they would sign up and say like, okay, here's the details that I have. And then once I have these, we would want to make sure that, you know, I don't know, maybe both of these need to be, can I get this to do the thing? Yeah. So I want both of these to end up with like a parent to child connection, so that I know which kid on the team is connected to which parent. So as the coach, I'm kind of aware of what's going on, who's responsible for what. And then whenever we want to create a game, we want to be able to, like, we need the game info, like the date, time, etc. And then we would need to like create responsibility slots. And this would be your, let's say, like snack, drink, whatever. And so then once you've got these, we would need like a sign up flow. And so, and then we have to decide, like, is this going to be round robin? Is this going to be something else? Let's kind of hand wave over that. And then for the reminder workflow, we need to be able to tell a parent it's their turn. And maybe that happens like immediately upon game schedule. And then maybe we have, you know, a 72-hour reminder. And then we have a 24-hour reminder. And if we don't get like some kind of a confirmation workflow, and if we don't get that, then we know it's time to panic. And so this is like, then we have sort of the ability to start making decisions here based on like, okay, did they confirm or not? Let me pull this up so it's easier to see. And if they did, then we're in good shape, right? Then we just like go about our lives and we play a game. If they did not, then we know we need to worry, because now we need to have some kind of a flow to like find another parent or something. Like what's our flow? So again, and I'm not going to build this whole app, but just sort of thinking about this, like you can see that we didn't get into the tech at all as we're starting to think about what needs to be solved. And then once we sort of know what we're doing, we can start to come in here and, you know, honestly, I might even come in here with like just a comment kind of vibe. And maybe I'm going to come in here and say, all right, so this could honestly just be a Google form. Or if it's not a Google form, maybe it's, you know, maybe we do something else. Then if we have like the game creation, maybe we want to use we could use like Postgres, maybe that's something like Neon, or maybe we want to use an actual CMS, and maybe that's like Sanity, or maybe we want something that's a little more like integrated, like a kind of like appy DB thing, and maybe that's Convex, because then Convex could handle a lot of our logic for us. But we can make all those decisions. We can start kind of looking at the possibilities here. And then with each of these things, right, we need some kind of a notification system. So maybe that's Twilio, maybe that's Resend. And so you can kind of see like how I start working through these things, where I start thinking about each of these pieces and start kind of wondering, okay, which piece of tech is going to get me closer to the outcome that I want. And like, maybe for something like this, I actually want like, maybe this is like ingest or temporal is handling the workflow, because it has a bunch of like things need to happen, and based on actions that might take a really long time to complete, we want to go to the next step, but we want to make sure that it happens. So we need that sort of durable workflow set up, and that could be a good way for us to get that. So, this is the sort of the beginnings of how I would start working through these problems. And then once I've got a good idea of sort of what the outcomes are that I'm after, and what the main flows that I want people to do are, then I can start making decisions about what the tech will be. And then based on that, I would probably start putting together some high level wireframes of like, okay, this is what the page looks like. And then I'd start thinking, okay, so if that's what I want the page to look like, how would that map to the tech that I've started talking about? And if at any point I find something where I'm like, I don't actually know how this would work in, say, a CMS, then I need to question that decision. Like, can I actually do this in the tool that I want, or am I about to sign up for a bunch of really custom work? And if I'm about to sign up for some really custom work, let's maybe revisit that decision and see if perhaps one of the other tools, like maybe a Convex or something, is going to solve this problem for me in a way that doesn't require me to reinvent wheels. Or maybe, Postgres has got some built-in stuff that lets me handle this, that is that I can get more custom with without having to kind of undo decisions that were baked into a CMS. So it's very it has to be very situational for me, and it needs to be kind of built from the standpoint of how do we make choices that serve the outcomes that we're after, as opposed to starting with the tech and then trying to make the outcomes fit the capabilities of the tech, if that makes sense. I hope that was useful. I'm gonna stop there, because I feel like I could talk about this all day, and I don't know that it was even what you were asking. Dude, the hotels and flights are so expensive. Yeah, Epic Web Conf is going to be a blast if you can make it, but also it is very, very expensive. Do I use ChatGPT or AI? A little bit, like not a ton. My experience with ChatGPT has been that, generally speaking, I was talking about this yesterday because somebody was showing me a tool they're working on, and it was a tool that was sort of designed to take a lot of the upfront organizational stuff out of I'm not gonna like out the tool or anything, because I wasn't very nice about it, but I think it was a tool that was kind of designed to get somebody 80% of the way to a finished product without having to do anything. They kind of wrote like subject matter, and it sort of gave them 80% of the thing they were trying to make. And I think that's fine if you can already do it without the tool, because otherwise what ends up and I need to caveat this a lot of different ways, because you don't need to understand how everything works. Like, I clearly use computers with no understanding of bytecode or all of the things that are happening on the hardware part of the thing. Like, I don't know how to make a rock think. I just know how to press the keys, and like, I understand JavaScript. I don't understand what happens after the JavaScript gets fed into a computer, right? And I get that. You don't need to understand everything that's happening in order to be productive. And I don't want to imply that that's what I'm saying. But I think the thing that worries me a little bit is that I don't feel like a lot of the AI tools are abstracting doing. Like, it's not like they're not abstracting a thing that I understand well, and I just need to get, it's not abstracting like when I write some JavaScript, I don't have to manually unroll the loops into bytecode so that it can actually run on a hard drive or on a motherboard or whatever. It's more like it's trying to remove the need to think at all. And that concerns me a little bit because the thing that makes someone valuable, right? The reason that we get hired to do these jobs is because we have learned how to ask good questions, how to tease apart a problem, how to think about something and make hypotheses that will guide us toward good solutions. And I think that as you become more and more senior in an organization, the specifics of the tech start to matter a lot less than your ability to ask really good questions. And the thing that I'm bummed about is that it feels like a lot of the tools are trying to remove the necessity to ask questions. You can kind of say like, make me an app, and it will make you an app. And it doesn't ask you why. It doesn't ask you what it's for. It doesn't ask you what the outcomes should be. It just will sort of spit out some code that does whatever you described. And yes, in order to do a good job with AI tools, you will eventually need to learn how to describe things better, because that's the nature of anything. Is it's all at the end of the day just communication. Can you communicate with a coworker, with a client, with a computer? It doesn't matter. But the thing that I'm a little bit worried about is that many of these tools seem to be trying to take the place of conversations that would happen inside of a team. And what I worry about a little bit is that I haven't really seen these tools making, like, they're not challenging people to be better. And so what I worry about is that what AI does, if you take AI as a starting point, is it tends to allow a mediocre effort to produce a mediocre result with no challenging or questioning of what could have been done better or more effectively, or let's examine those decisions. Why would we do it this way versus the other way? All these questions. And so I think the thing that I worry about a little bit with AI is that it is often being marketed as permission to stop thinking instead of as a tool that will let somebody experienced work more effectively. Because I do think there are a lot of cases where, for example, I use it every once in a while where I've got a loop and I don't really want to write the whole loop, so I can just fire up Copilot and say, hey, build this reducer that does thing, and it will get me a lot of the way there. And I'll look at it, it'll spit out some junk, I'll delete the junk, I'll fix it with this manual thing. But it saved me 10 minutes of having to like Google what the exact syntax of a reducer is, and then trying to doing the little testy stuff to make sure that it's doing what I want. And because I'm like working within my own context, like I'm mostly building this thing on my own. It's sort of an augmentation that allows me to quickly generate things that I've generated 1,000 times before, and it saves me time in that way. But I think the thing that I worry about is that there's this sort of, it feels very tongue in cheek, but like a push toward vibe coding, and I still don't quite understand what people mean by vibe coding. But what I'm beginning to understand is that it's sort of intentionally not examining the output or worrying about whether or not it's done anything that's valuable, and instead just sort of like tab autocomplete until you get to something that hopefully kind of works the way that you were telling it to work. And the thing that I've noticed is that it reminds me a lot of the way that I've, how am I going to say this? Because this is a very This is like an incendiary thing that I believe, but let's see. Am I just going to be this guy? I don't know. Get your clips ready, I guess, because I'm about to hot take it here. There's a type of person that I generally try to avoid who is uncurious. Like they live their lives trying to discover shortcuts instead of trying to understand, and they will do a whole lot of work and make a whole lot of noise to avoid the effort of having to improve themselves, if that makes sense. And I think that a lot of AI is a sort of blanket layer of permission for people to not be curious and to sort of gleefully disdain or even outright attempt to destroy curiosity. And that to me is one of those like existential threats to humanity, because I feel like what separates us into something that's special and unique is our willingness to sort of examine and challenge and wonder and question. And if we codify not doing that as good, and we start to talk about being curious or trying hard or any of that stuff as being cringe, then we're effectively glorifying sucking at things. And that's a bummer to me. And I don't, I currently don't bring many people around who aren't actively curious, actively trying to improve, because it's not fun to be around somebody who every time you bring something up, they kind of, like you ask a big question and they just sort of like make a fart noise and go, who cares? It's like, what? I mean, I know that it doesn't matter, but I'm curious. Like, I want to understand. Like, yes, I know I don't need to know how the plumbing under my sink works, but it's kind of interesting to know what those knobs do and like how they manage to make toilets run without electricity. Like that's fascinating. No, I don't need to know it. No, I could live my entire life never having to figure out that information. But the fact that I figured it out feels cool. And at a couple points in my life, it's been useful because, like we had a toilet handle break and I was able to find like a piece of wire and kind of like reassemble that toilet tank structure so that we could, not have to send people around the corner to use the bathroom and instead like continue operating with the bathroom in the studio. And it's like, will I use that many more times in my life? Almost certainly not, right? Like if there's a real problem in my bathroom, I'm calling a plumber. I'm not an expert and I don't pretend to be one. But a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of willingness to tease apart a problem has served me exponentially in so many ways. And the life that I have now, the career that I have now is basically built entirely on a giant stack of me wondering if I could figure something out. Like, can I figure out how this computer works? Can I figure out how to design something? Can I figure out how this camera operates? Can I figure out how to make a TV show that's at a level of quality that I feel is good enough to go on Netflix or something? Every single one of those is a thing that I could have just said like, no, who cares? It's not for me, right? But because I dug in and because I wanted to get curious and figure stuff out, I kind of peeled back some layers and realized that a lot of things weren't as challenging as I thought, and that, some of these things that we write off as being magic or mystery are actually just sustained effort. And if I was willing to make that sustained effort, I could do stuff that everybody else thought was impossible. And as a result, I've been able to live this life that I have where like it doesn't even make sense to me. Like I can't believe I get to do the stuff that I get to do. But it's all built on this idea that, curiosity is a good thing, and making sustained efforts to do things that might feel utterly meaningless in the long run, but are intellectually satisfying, and like trying to understand why instead of just how do I shortcut to a solution. That it really is important. And I think that maybe that's my fundamental discomfort with AI is I feel like a lot of what's being marketed and hyped about AI is kind of fundamentally at odds with that. It's like, well, you don't need to learn to be creative. You can just generate art. And yeah, it sucks a little bit, but then you don't have to be an artist. Like, why would you spend all that time learning to draw when you could just have the AI draw for you? It's like, well, because it's satisfying to learn how to draw. Why would you learn how to write when the AI can just write for you? I don't know, because it's like kind of a good thinking and almost therapeutic exercise to get some thoughts out of your brain into words that feel satisfying to read. Like this is, it almost feels to me like there is it's not anti-intellectual, because I think these are smart people, but it's anti-beauty, maybe, if that makes sense. Like it's a utilitarian to the point of being actively antagonistic to things that they can't do and therefore consider meaningless. And that lack of curiosity is ever narrowing the scope of what they consider meaningless, because it's ultimately like, you know, we're seeing it now where they're like, well, I will burn the planet if it means that I can keep working on my tech, because my tech is the only thing that matters. And that to me is a very, I don't know, it's not a thing that I feel good about. Is this what you thought we were going to talk about when you asked me if I use ChatGPT? Oh God. Okay, let's let's see. Let me crawl back up here. What's my current full stack framework of choice? I will start with Astro on just about everything these days, because if I find out that all I need is static information, then Astro is doing that by default. If I need to add in server rendered pages, if I need to add in authentication, if I need to add in databases, I can do all that. Like if you look at CodeTV, CodeTV is effectively a Netflix clone, and I'm running it entirely in Astro. If I am making a single page app, which the dashboard of, or no, it's not actually, I figured out how to do it in Astro alone. In other apps, you can just mount, you know, you can basically make a page that's dashboard or whatever that is in fact a mounted SPA, and you kind of get, like, you don't need much else, right? So it's, if Astro will effectively act as Veet in that instance. But then if you did need to add like a terms and conditions page, you don't have to build that into your SPA. You can just add another page in Astro and you get that to work, right? So for me, I'm pretty much always starting there, because it does all the things that I need, and it tends to have the lowest amount of what I would consider to be crap. Because a lot of the frameworks are sort of built on this concept that you will either be all in on them, or you like won't get the benefits. And you'll see that in a lot of the discussion about a lot of frameworks is it's basically like, well, I'm trying to like just do an SPA, and they're like, why? You're not taking full advantage of the framework. It's like, yeah, I know, I just need an SPA. And then, you know, so with Astro, what I love is you say, well, like I don't need server-side rendering. Like, yeah, it's off by default, don't worry about that. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of nice, actually. Like it's nice to not have a framework telling me that I'm wrong if I make a different decision than whatever the current accepted framework decision is. But yeah, do I abandon projects constantly? I have a tendency to, so I have a million ideas, because making ideas is one of my favorite things to do. And what will end up happening is a lot of times I, as almost like a pressure release valve, will start building something just to sort of get through the process of starting something new, because it's always fun to sort of puzzle out how would I construct something. But I don't have time to build it, and I don't have time to maintain it, and I'm certainly not going to turn it into a business. And so a lot of times I just sort of take the effort of getting started as like a therapy. I build through it. I get it to a point where I'm like, okay, I see how I could finish that. And then I thank it and I let it rot in GitHub. I've tried to scope that down even further for myself these days, and I will now do a lot of projects on CodePen, because it like eliminates the need for me to treat it like a website. I am trying to think through a concept. Like I just made one I can share And this one is actually going to end up being, it will end up being something eventually, but in my code pen, I have this thing, right? And so I was, why on earth is that doubled up? I must have copy pasted this twice or something. But either way, I was trying to figure out how I could do this sort of like responsive bento grid thing, and I wanted it to have, you know, some different capabilities based on what I wanted, right? And so I have a link tree. It's pretty simple right now. If you go to my links, and I did a really simple one, but I wanted one that would work on mobile. And so if I get to like a mobile size, ignoring the fact that I've copied this twice for some reason, let me actually just, why did I do that? Who knows? Let's just maybe delete the second one. So I've got my mobile layout, but then as you get bigger, instead of doing what this one does, where it just kind of sits in the center, this one can this one can expand and kind of fill the page. And I like that. It feels nice to me. And I also wanted to learn how CSS subgrid worked. And I wanted to see if I could do sort of a complicated responsive grid, because I hadn't done a lot of work with that. And all of that led me to this, which is, it will eventually be practical. But like, I also have been kind of tinkering on a new site design for years at this point. Like, I'll start it and I'll abandon it. And then a few months later, I'm like, oh, I have an idea. And like, that eventually has sort of all come together into these different components. But like, if you look through my code pen, I think we'll probably look at the public stuff, because I have a bunch of like half-baked ideas in here. But a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in here is just me trying something. You know, I wanted to see if I could figure out this glass effect. I wanted to learn how has worked. I wanted to see if I could do this holiday lights thing that was all CSS and SVG, like no JavaScript or anything. And each one of these things that I've worked on has, like, maybe sometimes I've actually used them. But a lot of times, like, this was an idea that I had where I wanted to see what it would look like to, you can see the highlight kind of comes in. And I wanted to see if I could build something that like drove attention and got people to read stuff that was on the page that wasn't a headline. And I haven't used this. It's a project that I like tried and then abandoned. And it was a great learning experience. I don't know if I'll ever use it. I mean, maybe I will. It's kind of fun. But it was a way for me to sort of like process an idea. And then in my not CSS stuff, I have a bunch of, you know, little, like, I set up a database, try to do a thing. I built a dashboard. I was trying to solve this other thing, because it just helps me process and gives me a low stakes way to build something that I know I don't have to care about, if that makes sense. And I do think that's, like, I don't even consider them abandoned. I almost consider them like low stakes experiments, like not trying to do a thing. And that is actually maybe an important distinction. I treat side projects like ephemeral trash. And I think that's important, because I remember when I was younger, I would treat every side project like, maybe this is the one that makes me millions of dollars. Maybe this is the one that I go try to seek funding for. Maybe this is the one that turns into a lifestyle business and I'll have lots of users. And so there was all this pressure. Like, I felt like I needed to do it a certain way. I needed to get it right. I had to, you know, do all the right security practices. And it prevented me from actually building the thing, because I would worry so much about architecture, and I would be like setting up auth before I'd even built the functionality of the app. And then I was like sad about it, because I'd made this really tough thing that I'd made before. Like, I've set up auth before. I've set up a lot of the things that make an app like scalable and usable by other people. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to build something that was like, you know, a list of restaurants that I could share with my friends. I don't need that to be it doesn't have to be ready to sell, right? It doesn't need to be ready to accept credit cards. It can just exist and kind of suck a little bit, because what I cared about was, say, texting the name of a restaurant into a backend that could then determine where that restaurant was and grab its coordinates to plot it on a map. That's a cool thing that I wanted to figure out. And I never actually got around to it, because I was so worried about the scale and like, you know, maybe I could sell this to Eater someday. Maybe this is the app that I could like break into the food scene with, which are all things that I'd love to do, but it's not my job. That's not what I'm here for. It's not more important to me than what I'm doing now. So instead, I have to drop the stakes and just treat side projects like side projects. They're hobbies. They are not businesses, and it's okay if they suck. It's okay if they're not secure, because I'm not marketing them. I'm not selling them. I don't have users, and I don't intend to, because I don't want to run another business. Right? And so it's okay to build it with placeholder auth. It's okay for it to be a proof of concept, and it's okay if half the site doesn't work. You can just build the part that was interesting and use it as a learning experience and then move on. Let's see. Have I been getting into using open props more? I honestly have not, but I think a lot of that is because I like really truly enjoy writing CSS the hard way. Like I think that I approach CSS the way that somebody who like hand carves spoons or like does wood turning approaches a project. It is not about efficiency or saving time or scalability. It is very much about handcrafting something that I think is neat. And so my opinions on CSS come with a big old grain of salt, because it is one of those things that I treat it like making pottery, or like it is a craft that I deeply enjoy, and I am not worried about how efficient or optimized it is. Let's see what so what I reach for on the back end. So I will use Astro. Astro has the concept of like endpoints, which are effectively serverless functions, or honestly, if you're running they are server full. What's the right way to say this? Endpoints in Astro are a way to drop into a backend execution environment, and you can deploy them as serverless functions if you go to, say, Netlify or Vercel, or if you deploy to Fly.io, you're deploying to a server full environment, like a long-running node process. That, once I'm in there, I will tend to reach for things like I've been using ingest to power CodeTV. It's really good. I just got a chance to look at temporal a little bit, which is similar to ingest. Also a great option. I like Convex a lot. I built the software that runs Leet Heat. Is basically a complex convex app. It's like convex and XState. I really like state machines. I like convex. I like the durable execution workflow. I think that state machine plus ingest is actually a pretty. I haven't actually tried it yet. This is like a theory that I'm building. I feel like that would be a pretty unstoppable workflow, because you kind of have like the durable workflow. Make sure that you've got predictability in your functions. Everything you're writing is effectively a pure function, and then within those functions, you can have a state machine that sort of initializes at whatever step of the process, and then is able to, you know, make sure that choices that get made are within the realm of possibility, making impossible states impossible, so to speak. And that is, but yeah, that tends to be where I reach is there. I'm still in the node world. I've done a little bit of like Rust and the most cursory amount of Go and Python. I think they're all cool. I just haven't had the project that I needed it for. I think if I joined a team that wrote any of those languages, it would be more of a like an urgent thing for me to learn. But because I haven't been in that situation, I don't write anything that's performance sensitive enough for Node to be the problem. And honestly, Node is fast enough these days that I feel like there are very few situations where the language itself becomes a problem. It's almost always the way we're using, like, if we have optimized all of the things out of our code that make it slow, then we can worry about the languages. But I'm going to be able to optimize Node code, given my experience, much more than I can optimize any of the others. So it's far more likely that I would be making the code slow than the language itself, which is why I haven't like prioritized learning Go or Rust or anything like that. But yeah. Let's see. feel like AI made me lazy as a developer. I mean, sometimes it's okay to be lazy, but I just think it's about being very intentional about it, right? Like I think what Braden's saying is good. Like if you use AI as a tutor where you're saying like, what is this? And then after it explains it, you go try to write that code yourself to make it sink in. That's good. I am still, I think the other piece of it is I really do think that like pair programming with a person is so important. And I love that it's there as that AI is there as an option for people who do not have that opportunity. But I hope it doesn't encourage people to not seek that opportunity, because there's really just something to be said about the energy and the exchange of like sitting with somebody else while they work. A lot of what you pick up is stuff you would never think to ask for, and they would never think to teach. It often gets called tacit knowledge, and I am a huge believer in the importance of tacit knowledge exchange. And I think that's why people have apprenticeships. That's why we used to, when you had craftsmen that would build boats or plumbers or electricians or any of those things, you would always have this sort of like apprentice and journeyman model where people just kind of had to sit for a long time. They just kind of watched and they did chores. But as they're watching, they're kind of seeing a little bit about how the more experienced people interact with the tools. And then as you get more experience, you start to do it, but you're doing it alongside somebody with a ton more experience who is going to show you stuff that you wouldn't think to ask about. The little code things that we learn, like a shortcut in the terminal or a keystroke, or even just things about how we organize or think about our code that aren't necessarily important, but they change a lot, if that makes sense. Like I have learned some things throughout my career that they're just this is why I think it's important that you have to pair with people, because I can't actually think of a lot of them if I'm trying to just recall, right? But one good example is I was watching a dev go through their Git alias or their shell aliases, and they had an alias where they'd like aliased rm, which is the removal command, to a program called trash. And I was like, well, that's silly. Why would you do that? And they were like, because that way when you delete something from the command line, it goes into the recycle bin instead of being immediately deleted. So if you accidentally delete something that you didn't mean to, like you typo, your hand slips, you hit enter too early, or the forbidden, like I just deleted everything with an over ambitious remove command, then unless you've done catastrophic damage, you can just restore things from the recycle bin and there's no harm, no foul. Not a thing that was important, not a thing I ever would have thought to ask. But now that I've seen it, I've fixed it, and it saved me a couple times where I accidentally deleted. I thought I was deleting the package lock, but I accidentally deleted package JSON. And could I have just regenerated it? Of course. Could I have gone back to Git and gotten another version? Of course. But instead, I just went to my recycle bin and I restored, and the problem was solved. I didn't have to like go into Git and figure out how to, reset on a thing. It's like the stuff that just makes life a little bit easier. Or like if you delete a file that's not checked into Git, previously you would have just been hosed, right? Like if you do, there's a couple commands in Git that are destructive. They'll destroy files that aren't checked in. And if you don't know that, right? Like again, it's just little stuff that you pick up along the way. And that's the sort of thing that I think is so important, that it's tough to learn without a human partner, because and honestly, like with like lots of people to pair with, because each of us has picked up a little bit of this stuff, and the more people we partner with, the more we share that knowledge. Just sort of, again, it's tacit knowledge. So that tacit knowledge exchange happens because you're watching me program and you go, wait a minute, what'd you just do? And then I explain it and you go, oh my God, that's like, I'd never even considered that was possible. And now you do it, and the next person you pair with will ask you the same question. With an AI, you would have to specifically ask about that, and it would know the answer, but you have to bring knowledge in. And I think that's why it's so important to think of it as it's an augmentation, right? It can't teach you things that you don't know to ask about. So you're inherently limited with an AI by your own understanding. And so I think the thing that's tricky there is figuring out how do you how do you like pair this stuff in a way that, when you're working on stuff you already know, AI is great because it'll help you solve problems quickly. It'll help you kind of, remind me what this does or explain where this code is used. I really like it as like, tell me how this function is used in this code base, and it can go crawl through the whole code base and figure out, oh, it's called here and here and here, and this is what the arguments look like, and all this kind of stuff, because it just makes life easier. Otherwise, you'd have to do that manually. You'd be like clicking definitions. You'd be doing a find in files and hunting around, and then you don't know if it's in a mono repo. Like maybe it gets called somewhere you never thought about, but if you're in the mono repo with an AI, then that's something that it can figure out for you. So all of that to say, there is a balance to be struck with it, I think. You can replace vibe with YOLO. I think that is very true. Vibe coding just meant. Oh, you want to know the other hot take that I have? I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers are trash. Let's see. Let's see. Building a farm because you want to learn. Oh man, that's super cool. See, this is the sort of thing I love this. It is a very complicated long-term project that is ultimately, from a strict utilitarian standpoint, it is ultimately wasteful, but it's going to be so rewarding all these different ways around, and like it's probably going to change unforeseen parts of your life. I think it's so cool. Homesteading is the same as software development: experimenting, building, iterating, improving, failing. This is, yes, I love it. I love it because I feel the same way about just about everything I'm working on, like video production. We became homeowners in 2018, and our process of learning what it's like to be homeowners has been exactly the same as it was to learn how to be a software developer, or how to be a touring musician, or how to be a a producer or a director. You start out knowing very little, but you know it's possible. So then you Google a bunch, and then you try something and it fails spectacularly, and then you find somebody more experienced who explains why, and then you practice and you try again and you keep doing stuff, and every time it gets a little bit better until you feel like maybe I'm actually okay at this. But yeah. Don't ask Jason questions. Fair enough. Yeah, let's see. The CodeTV picture of me in the code pen. Okay, so wait, the CodeTV picture of me in the code pen, the where is it? This one? Well, thank you. We started doing a thing. I always, like, everything you add to a production costs money, right? And so I was resistant to the idea of adding behind the scenes photos, but it honestly has had such a huge return, because getting photos of like the folks who are at the shoot, of the crew that's working on it, we get group photos, everybody gets portraits. Like, it's kind of it was one of those things that I tried it as an experiment, because I also, like, I met this photographer. I thought they were super cool and I wanted to work with them. And so Jason Hill is his name. And I was like, let's see how it goes. And then at the end of it, we got the photos back, and I was like, man, I should have been doing this the whole time. Like, I should have absolutely found the money from day one, because having a record of what we're working on and like how things are being made, who was here, great group photos, like, it's very difficult to overestimate the value of those. I keep having ideas for new personal sites, but they just result in spending hours looking at fonts. I feel this so deep, like all the way in the bottom of my soul. Let's see. TypeScript dev did Doom in TypeScript types. Yeah, this is the sort of thing, like, this is art, right? Like, was this a good idea? Absolutely not. Like, I think he said something in the video about being able to get like 5 frames per second or something, but it's incredible. Like, it's such a good, what an amazing learning experience, because when he talks through what he had to learn to make that function, he was down to like the bare bottom of what programming languages do, right? It was, and I am 1000% sure that even though this was a enormously like big waste of time from a practical standpoint, the learning that came out of it, the skills that came out of it, and the ability to sort of understand what's happening underneath the things that we're doing with our code, probably going to make him so much better as an engineer throughout the rest of his career, right? So it's very difficult to yeah, like why would an AI do that? It'd be silly to do with AI because it wouldn't really be as fun or as cool, right? Like it's not. I don't know. Thank you. I love. I also love the new studio. I'm having a great time with it. Is it okay to approach a small business with a demo of a site remake for them? And is it ethical to ask if they'd like a website remodel? I mean, is it ethical? Like, it is ethical to pitch anybody on anything, I think. I am of a mind that if you've got something valuable, then offering it is always a good thing. I think the other side of that coin is, you know, we have to also be ready to accept no as an answer. And we, especially if what you're doing is like when you do that, um, if you're showing up and saying like, I'd like to do a site review, it's sort of the equivalent of door-to-door sales. Well, you're going to get rejected a ton, right? And so just be ready for that. And I would also say be ready for very low conversion and that sort of thing, because that is a very common approach. Like I get cold emails all the time of somebody saying like, I found usability issues with your website and my team will build you a new website and, you know, we have competitive rates. I think so. Ethical, sure. Effective, maybe not so much. I do think, and it's very high effort, high risk to like build a company, a website without a contract. And if you do it in a way that is very easily repeatable, then you're probably not building something that's like valuable to that website, to that company uniquely. It's more of like a cookie cutter template thing, which is, you know, why wouldn't they go to Wix or Webflow or something for that? So I think it depends on what you want to be, right? Like I've repeated this 1,000 times. I'll repeat it again. Careers are a pie eating contest where the reward for winning is more pie. So if you put out into the world that you do discount web design and that it's sort of for like the lowest bidder kind of stuff, that is the sort of work that you will be known for and the sort of work that you will attract. And there is money to be made in that space. And I'm not saying that nobody should do it. But if the eventual goal is to move up to bigger clients and bigger projects, then it probably isn't the sort of thing that's going to build confidence in your company if what people see from you is an effort to sort of like cold email, low price, you know, budget web design. As an alternative, what I do think can work really well is rather than like building a website for a company to then try to sell to that company, what a lot of designers will do is they'll take a brand or a website or an app that they find frustrating or less than ideal, and then they'll do a portfolio project where it's a hypothetical redesign of company, and they put it in their portfolio and do that as a way to show like, this is how I would approach a rebrand. So as a web developer, I think you can do the same thing and you don't even need to use the company. You can just take their general business and say, okay, I think the way that e-commerce sites are typically built is less than ideal because of XYZ reasons. Here's how I would build one. And then you can build it and put that in your portfolio as like, this is a great portfolio or a great e-commerce site. If you want me to build one of these, here's a quote, like here's how to get a quote. And then you're sort of kind of flipping the script. And then when you reach out to companies, you're not saying, I'll give you a discount web design. You're saying, I can build quality stuff, and if you want this, I will build it for you for a fair price. And a fair price is different than a cheap price, if that makes sense. Because you can always, like, a fair price will get higher as you are more in demand and as you get more experienced. A cheap price has to stay cheap. And so that positioning is important, and the way that you tell people to think about you is also important. If you use words like low price, discount, cheap, then that will get people to associate you with discount, low price, and cheap. And that makes it very difficult to move into premium later on, because it would be the same as, like, if all of a sudden Temu started saying, well, we also offer, high quality designer bags for $15,000. You'd be like, absolutely not. I'm not buying anything off Temu that I don't expect to fall apart within 10 seconds. Right. And that's because that's what they specialize in. They specialize in cheap, fast, low cost. Right. And you know that it's crap because nobody can charge those prices unless it's crap. And that's okay. Like, that's the niche they found, and they make obviously a ton of money doing that. But it would be very difficult for them to transition into a luxury brand. They would actually, most likely, and if they might have already done this, they would probably have to launch a second company that would be another brand that can do the luxury stuff. And that's a huge amount of work, right? Because it's not just like, you have to build that brand equity. You don't get awareness of Temu and then somebody goes, yes, I want the luxury brand that Temu runs. It's not going to work, right? You would have to build it completely separately. And I think that the same is true of pretty much all services businesses and goods businesses. If you give people a window of how to treat you, you tell them what, you tell people what you want. And that's the pie thing. If I put work out, it demonstrates to people what I do and what I want, and then they will ask for what I've delivered. So I don't know if that's helpful. I hope I didn't just dash all your dreams, but that's my general approach there is show people what you want to be hired for, and then do everything in your power to get in rooms where you can talk to people and show them what you're working on, because you will get that first shot. Once you get the first shot, it is much easier to get to the next shot, and just kind of keeps moving. Web Dev Challenge is in editing now. We are aiming for the middle of April-ish for the first episode of season 2, so stay tuned for that. That will also come out on the CodeTV site for supporters first. So if you want early access and you want to support the creation of more of these shows, it would mean a lot to me if you could consider becoming a supporter. It's $5 a month is the entry tier that gets you access to everything, and you can go higher if you want and can afford it. And we will spend all of those dollars on making more great content. So let me throw that link up there again if anybody wants to get in there. So let's see. Let me dive in. Yeah, I've always learned better by watching others. I agree, 100% agreed. Let's see. I feel like the Red Hot Chili Peppers are one of those bands that definitely starts with it is a very polarizing group, right? And I personally believe that the Red Hot Chili Peppers have been writing the same song for 6 albums, and I don't understand how nobody but me can hear it. Yeah, human learning is much more efficient. Yes, 100%. I agree. Why change the name? The big reason that I changed the name is that Learn with Jason centers me. And it was built off of, I had the live show. I was on 2 days a week. I had these ideas for ways that I would do more stuff that I was in. And as I've learned more about what I enjoy, as I've realized what I want the long-term vision of this thing to be, it became abundantly clear that it's very important to me that I don't have to be the face of everything that's being done. In fact, I don't want to. Like, I want this to be something that's for the dev community, right? It shouldn't be a vehicle for glorifying me. It should be about us. And so for it to be about us, I had to get my name out of it, and I wanted it to say more of what we're doing. And so we're making TV for developers. So CodeTV is the goal. That's the plan. That's what we want to do. And it makes it easier, like when we run Leet Heat and Mark Texan is the host, and we've got contestants that don't include me, it's less odd that it's like Learn with Jason, but then I'm only in it for a couple seconds when I'm, the like kind of the off to the side person calling in an answer or whatever. And there's other ideas that I would like to work on if we can raise the capital for them that would have other people hosting, and I might not be in them at all. I would be more of an executive producer or a director. And if that's the case, I don't want it to feel weird. I don't want people to be mad that they're on like Jason's channel and I'm not in the thing. I want them to be stoked because they're on CodeTV, and CodeTV highlights people in the developer community in creative and entertaining ways. That to me, that's the really important part. And I think like I am definitely feeling the pain of a rebrand. It's had a pretty rough impact on like growth. It's had a rough impact on brand recognition. People aren't watching the videos as often. Like it was a big lift, and I'm very worried that it's going to bite me in the ass, but I know that it was the right choice long term. And I'm hopeful that if we just kind of stay patient, stay the course, keep making good stuff, that it will, people will start to know CodeTV instead of looking for my face specifically. But in the meantime, we have still put my face back on everything so that people know that I am still here. But okay. So let's see. Let me keep rocking down this list. As the market for software devs is tough. Any recs for what college students should do trying to break in? Build and make friends. Like I've said this a million times. I'm not going to get into it in a ton of detail right now, but if you are consistently building things, if you are having fun, if you're trying to make things that make your friends laugh, that people might want to share, then you're giving yourself more visibility. If you are making friends, if you're collaborating with people, if you're showing up to events or meetups or anything that you can do to get more plugged into the community, that is going to pay dividends, because the people that you meet now, they might be junior engineers just like you, but give it 5 years, and the people that you're meeting who are junior engineers now are going to be senior engineers somewhere else, and they're all going to be at different companies, and their companies are going to be hiring, and they're going to remember who they would, who their friends are, and they're going to come find you and say like, hey, I know you're looking. We're looking for exactly what you need. And all of that is the sort of thing that it's easy to discount, right? Because what we think and what we're told is that if you study the right thing in school, you're guaranteed a good job, and that's just not true. What will guarantee you a good job is a good network and a visible skill set. And if you are visible and connected, you will get jobs. And both of those things can feel very difficult to create out of the gate, but I have very rarely seen somebody who consistently creates stuff fail to gain visibility. And people who are just down to talk, hang out, be cool with people, they always make a good network, right? Because networking is not exchanging business cards. It's becoming friends with people who have similar interests to you. That is a network, right? That's why the Ivy Leagues do so well, is because all of those people were classmates and they went to school together, and obviously they're all rich, or most of them are rich. And so they all go on to have great jobs, and then they call their school friends and they bring their school friends in, and then their school friends all have great jobs, right? It's like the networking there is who are your buddies. And that's why it's so frustrating when we see it in super visible places where like incompetent people get brought in as every level of US government, for example. But it's because we see people who are relying on their networks rather than credentials. And as unfortunate as that can be, especially in certain roles, for junior dev roles, for engineering roles, having a recommendation is going to make all the difference in a field where there are thousands of applications per job. And so, yes, the system is broken. No, it's not fair. Yes, you should 1000% be working to take advantage of the fact that humans are in fact social creatures, and who you know matters so incredibly much, and it is so important to be somebody that everyone in the industry considers a friend, right? So be cool, be helpful, don't take stuff personally. Try to be a net positive in every room you're in, so that you don't make enemies and don't end up having people who are like, I don't want to work with that guy, right? And it's takes a little while to get started, but it will pay you over and over and over again. Tacos for mods. All right, tacos for mods. You got it. Let's see. Same song and All About California. Yep. Also, I feel like I went especially sour when I saw that, what's his name? Anthony Kiedis. He's like 60 now and he's dating a 19-year-old. I was like, man, don't be that guy. Like, the creep test exists for a reason. I learned this from How I Met Your Mother, of all places. But it's half your age plus 7. If somebody is that much younger than you, just, don't. It's creepy. You're being creepy. Learn with Jason doesn't scale because I'm one person. CodeTV is community driven and scalable. I think that's part of it, but I also think I don't want it to be predicated on me at all. Like, I want to be somebody that people look forward to seeing on CodeTV, but like, here's a good example. I watch Mythbusters on the Discovery Channel when I was a kid. And when I watched that show, I was on Discovery Channel because I really liked the Mythbusters. However, I also didn't think that the Mythbusters were Discovery Channel. It was, or like Anthony Bourdain was a very, like, I loved Anthony Bourdain's show, but the network was like what made his show possible. And I don't know, like, he could, like, any of those people could have been heavily involved in the networks that they were part of, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I liked that network because they had a collection of programs that I liked, and I liked the people who were on those shows, and I wanted to watch their shows, but I held them as sort of separate entities in my head. Like, Mythbusters is cool. Discovery Channel was also cool. They were separate things, but Discovery Channel made Mythbusters possible, as well as Shark Week and other things that I thought were cool. And so to me, that was sort of the game that I was trying to play, was get it to the point where CodeTV is the company that makes Learn with Jason possible, or Web Dev Challenge possible, but they are not necessarily inseparable, if that makes sense. Sam Reich of CodeTV, like, legitimately, Sam Reich is a huge inspiration for what I'm doing. The financial model, a lot of the way that I'm thinking about expanding the programming, a lot of the way that I'm thinking about how stuff is constructed is heavily influenced by the way that Dropout TV is put together. And so I think, that's it. It was very encouraging to see that they were able to make that work. And I am cautiously optimistic that we can do the same thing with CodeTV. Thanks, Jeremy. Am I old enough to remember Tech TV? I feel like I remember Tech TV. What? Yeah, I'm definitely old enough to remember. I might be out of touch. It is highly likely that I just didn't know it existed. Was it because that wasn't? Was that like Merlin Mann and that group? Wow, Vinny. I can make that joke. You can't make that joke. Is there something different why I don't like Tailwind and prefer native CSS? I mean, again, I'll go back to the fact that I am very much the kind of person who I enjoy CSS as like a craft, not as like a thing that I want to do efficiently. So part of it is just that I feel like Tailwind is doing the part of CSS that I want to do, and that is ultimately just a preference thing, right? Like, I don't want Tailwind to do my job for me. I want to do that job because I like doing that job. It's very, very satisfying to me. The other thing about it is like, I feel like Tailwind is a great idea. I also feel like Tailwind is, it's patching a symptom that sort of exacerbates the underlying problem, which is that I think people have learned about CSS from people who learned CSS when it was much harder, because CSS in the 2000s was tricky. You had hacks, you had weird browser inconsistencies, you had, you know, these elaborate ways of solving problems because you didn't have Flexbox or Grid or any of that stuff. You know, you were basically dealing with like floats, and just sort of, it was like arcane stuff because we were hacking the language to do stuff that it wasn't built to do. And I think because of that, we ended up with a generalized view in the industry that CSS was kind of like a haunted house. And I think people who preferred backend JavaScript, they saw the structure of those languages as being safe and predictable, and they saw the arcane like workarounds that were being done in CSS is just sort of being like a sign of low quality. And I think that led to a sort of closing off of a huge segment of web developers towards CSS in general. And that became, it kind of got memed to the point where now I think people who have never actually used CSS immediately develop a prejudice that CSS is hard, because it's believed by so many people who are more senior than them that CSS is really hard. And I think that Tailwind is out to solve the problem of CSS being really hard without examining whether or not it still actually is. Because I think that all the improvements that have been made over the last, I mean, especially the last 5 years, but like, you know, since 2010, we've had huge improvements where we got Flexbox and Grid, and we've got now anchor positioning, which we just did a show on a little while back. We've got subgrid. We've got the modal and dialogue stuff. We've got, you know, all these animation controls. We've got variables. We just got the ability to do sibling index so that we can do staggering, and like we can really do a lot using CSS as it is intended to be used. It's not hacking anymore. We're not doing clear fixes and float lefts and all that stuff. We're actually able to just build it the way that it was intended in a very like declarative and predictable way that's extremely well documented on MDN. And with that being the case, the general, like the starting point of CSS is haunted, I think is disingenuous, because it's not anymore. Like CSS, you can still do arcane things with it, and definitely people still do. But people also do arcane things with JavaScript. Like we just talked about somebody using TypeScript to build Doom. If that's not arcane, I don't know what is, right? And so, yes, all programming languages are cursed. At the end of the day, we shouldn't have taught rots to think. And that is okay. Like it is okay that we taught rocks to think. It is okay that we can abuse literally every programming language that's been built. But I think that there is a certain amount of sort of like vestigial resistance to CSS because it's being handed down from people who learned it in 2005 to people who are working in 2025 with no re-examination of like what's the current state of things. And so I think that Tailwind at a certain level works to perpetuate that myth that CSS is too hard to work with directly. But I mean, all of that is a very philosophical sort of layering on top of the core thing, which is I prefer to do it the hard way. Like it is fun for me to do it the hard way. So that really, that sort of negates all of my other reasoning, because at the end of the day, I'm having a good time, and like I'm going to choose the thing I enjoy. But yeah, anyways, long answer. This is an interesting one. Once a certain age is reached, the frontal lobe is finished. You know, I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but I've noticed a growing urge to settle into thinking that everything after now is bad. Like I think this is like I've heard people joke about this before. I've thought about it a lot, and it does seem like there's a bit of an urge as we grow to approach things as like we're kids, right? And so everything new is incredible because like we're building the culture, we're the ones driving pop culture and stuff like that. Teenagers kind of rule the world in terms of like pushing a lot of culture. We get into our 20s and we're the coolest people on the planet, so everything we do is what's defining fashion and what makes it into what the slang is that everybody's using and all this kind of stuff, right? We have a lot of cultural dominance in our 20s, and so of course we're very into all of that. And as we get into our 30s, we start to slide out of that cultural relevance because the people who are younger than us are starting to reestablish culture in the ways that we did when we were kids. And so we start to feel like we're maybe being pushed out of being culturally dominant. And that can lead to us thinking that the things that are younger than us are like juvenile, silly, they're ruining everything. Like kids don't read anymore. Kids don't think anymore. Like, why would they put that stuff in their face? Why would they do their hair like that? Whatever it is, right? We hate everything. But at the same time, when we were kids, we were looking at everybody older than us saying, why are they stuck in their ways like that? Why do they have to be so old and whatever the word is now, cringy? And so we start to like there's this window that moves with us where things that were created in our prime are the correct things. Anything that's older than that is outdated, stuck in tradition, crusty, needs to be replaced. Anything that's younger than that is disrespectful, like throwing out too much knowledge, not all these things that we say about like how kids are and what they do. And I feel like that I've felt that kick in a couple times, and it's been really hard for me to not like it kicked in so hard for me with AI. Like, and I don't even think I fully avoided the feeling because I mean, y'all heard my rant. But like, I was very much like kids these days don't understand how important it is to not do this. Right. And then I was like, wait, hold on. How much of this is me saying like all new things that I don't understand are bad? And so I do think it and the urge continues to increase, right? As I see like the teenagers that live in my neighborhood are all rolling around in their like low-rise jeans, and they're dressed like Christina Aguilera from Genie in a Bottle music video, and I'm like, oh my God, why are we doing this again? All the kids have their like Jinko size jeans on again. I'm like, oh no. But at the same time, I get it. Like I made those bad decisions when I was a teenager, and I'm sure that they'll all grow out of it, and it'll be very funny when they bring back whatever fashion trend next. But it's I think the thing that is hard is that it is always work to stay up on culture. Like being plugged into what's cool in music, what's cool in movies, who the hot actors or directors or fashion designers or writers or any of these things, like who's the coolest JavaScript developer right now? Depends on who you ask, right? But like who are the people setting the trends? Who are the people building the culture? And I think that it can be really easy for us to say like the new culture carriers in the industry or in my community or whatever are bad or not valuable or whatever because I have more experience and I know what's good. But I also think that we very much run the risk of becoming inflexible and kind of curmudgeonly and then getting left behind because we were unwilling to learn something valuable because we considered it to be juvenile. So I don't know where the right balance is on this, and there's a decent chance that I'm getting this wrong constantly, but I do think that it's important to not like let the brain stop. Like we have long lives. I turned 40 this year. And so hopefully I've got at least 40 years left. And I certainly hope I'm not done learning, right? I hope in so far every decade in my life, I have looked back, you know, when I was 20, I look back on the things that I believed when I was 10, when I was in high school. And I was like, man, I had no idea. I got to let's actually go in 5. So like 25 looking back on 15, what a different world that was. 35 looking back on 25, same thing. How could I have possibly interacted with the world like that? I was missing so much context. There were so many things I didn't know, so many things that I believed I was 100% right on that I was absolutely ass backwards on. And I'm sure when I get to 45, I'm going to feel the same way about 35-year-old me. And I hope that stays true for the rest of my life. I hope every decade I'm able to say, I learned and grew so much that I barely recognize the person I was 10 years ago. And I do think that there's a tendency to give ourselves permission to stop that and to be the same person from anywhere from 35 to 55 until we die. And I don't know. I don't know if that's good. I think we should continue to grow and change and challenge. Okay, give me a second. I've been hydrating properly, and that means that now I have to use the restroom every 15 minutes. So I'm going to take a quick restroom break, and then when I come back, we can keep going on questions, or I can switch into code. I'll let you. You know what? Drop it in the chat. What do you want to see me do? I'll be right back. All right. Let's see. Oh, Leo Laporte. Okay, I remember Tech TV. I didn't watch very much of it, but I do remember it existing. Let's see. The importance of knowing software business and how to sell software to people compared to the skills of knowing lots of latest tools and frameworks. I have never regretted knowing a thing in my entire career. Like, building a skill just means I can do more. So, like, because when I worked in a startup, I'd done enough product work that I could talk through things like, what do we expect customers to pay? How does that work with, you know, like there's all the acronyms that get thrown around, like the ACV and the ARR and all the, you know, then the terms that you just have to know, like churn. And as I realized that I could have those conversations, I also realized that I had an easier time making the case for like why certain things were important. Because like as an engineer, I will talk about things like technical debt. I will talk about things like I don't know, performance of key things or whatever. And when you bring up technical debt and you say we need a sprint dedicated toward fixing the mess that we've made in this code, most of the company doesn't hear that as a good thing. They hear that as like, okay, but why should you get extra time to clean up a mess that you made, right? Because they don't know enough about engineering and they've never done it. to them, it's kind of like the same thing as saying, like, when we hear products say like, well, we just need, we need this by the end of the sprint. And you're like, there's no physical way that can happen. And they're like, but that's what's in the roadmap, right? That it's that similar kind of like, we can't possibly understand how product could say something like that to us because we don't understand the pressures they're under, or like how things were organized or any of that. So if you learn to speak marketing, if you learn to speak sales, if you learn to speak product, if you learn to think through why does a company exist, right? Like because it's, companies don't exist to pay software developers fat checks to like play with cool toys. That's unfortunately not how it works. We are paid to create a very specific product for a very specific customer who is hopefully going to pay for it. And if we use that as an opportunity to play with cool toys instead of solving that problem, our company is going to suffer and potentially fail, and then we're going to have to go get new jobs. And I don't want to do that, right? So instead, we have to be thinking about why are we here? What is the actual purpose? And being able to understand, that companies do in fact need to make money. And we can't just give everything away, even though it would make our users really happy and we'd be really popular in the community, because there's no way that's sustainable. Like, we can't afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month giving away infrastructure unless we have a plan to monetize it. And so that sort of thinking allows us to do things like if sales comes and their idea is, well, if we need to make money, why don't we just make everybody pay us money? And they're like, great, let's change the free tier to a $5 a month tier, not understanding how that would affect so much of the development landscape and the community, love and all the things that we care about on the dev side. We need to be able to come back with something alternative and explain, like, well, what if instead we had this sort of startup tier that, and then we can gate some features that only somebody with a team would need, that will encourage a lot of people to upgrade on their own, but we don't force anybody to do anything. That kind of conversation can lead to products that have an easier time growing, and that don't force the engineers to do something that they then have to feel like they need to defend on Twitter, because they'll feel very confident that they made a choice that was like, we want you to continue to enjoy this service, and in order for us to enjoy this service, we have to make money. This is one of the reasons I don't feel bad talking about how CodeTV gets sponsored or asking for y'all to become supporters, because you don't have to pay $5 a month to watch CodeTV. But if you do, it gives me more resources that I can use to make more shows and bring more people and do bigger and bigger productions, right? And if I work with companies, it means that the companies pay those production costs so that you don't have to. I don't have to like paywall content. You get to watch Web Dev Challenge for free. I don't have to, ask you to pay $19 for the season or to rent it for $3.95 or whatever it is when you go to Amazon and try to watch something. It's like, the business is what makes this all possible. And if we didn't have the business side of things, we wouldn't have any of it at all, because I would be working at another company trying to do this stuff on the side, and I would have 5% of the budget, maybe. And so integrating the business into the way we think about the product and into the way we think about software, I think is to me, that's a sign of somebody who's getting ready to become a senior staff plus engineer. It's I think a maturity to recognize that the tech isn't the point, right? The tech is a tool that lets us solve the problem, and the solution to that problem is the point. And if we could do, I always challenge a lot of ideas of like, okay, well, why can't this be a spreadsheet? Because a lot of times what people are doing is they're saying like, well, we want to build this tool. It's going to be really cool. It's got all these new technologies in it. And the ultimate outcome is it's some kind of like database or tracking thing. And I'm like, okay, why can't this be a spreadsheet? Like, I can build this in Excel. So why do we need any of this? And why do you need this really complicated infra to do this thing that somebody could do in Excel? And if you can't defend that, and you can't think through like, what are the actual business limitations, or what are the things that you need to solve differently than Excel can solve them, then you're probably not ready to launch a business, right? And I think those are the sorts of things that are important. It's like, it's super frustrating when somebody asks you that question. When you've got an idea, you're really excited about the idea, and then somebody tells you that they can do it for free, it makes you mad. right? But it's really important if you're about to go throw a ton of resources at something that you can justify, and not justify with hand waving, but justify with like actual information. Why is this solution going to be better than what people could do right now for free? And if you don't have a good answer, you might not have a business. You might have a side project, right? And that's okay. But it's one of those things that I think is building that skill set is going to pay enormous dividends, and it's probably going to, if you want to be on a leadership track, it'll put you on a leadership track. And if you want to be in a like a very senior IC track, you're going to need to learn it. Just make sure you don't also volunteer to manage teams, or else you're putting yourself on the leadership track. The comment about dating way younger. Yeah, I think, well, I mean, but also if you take the creep test and you do half your age plus 7, like an 80-year-old, half their age is 40, plus 7 is 47. So an 80-year-old and a 47-year-old kind of pass the creep test. Like if you're almost 50 and you want to date somebody of literally any age, I do not care, right? But if you're 19, right, minus 7 times 2, that's a 24-year-old is the oldest you should date before that 24-year-old is kind of a creep. Like if you're in your late 20s and you're dating teenagers, you're kind of a creep. If you're in your 60s and you're dating teenagers, you're gross. Right? Like that's just, I think that's sort of my general take on it is, but I really like that math, because I think as you get older, the age gap can get broader, but there's still a limit, right? Like if you're in your mid 30s and like, well, whatever, if you're in your mid 30s and you want to go date an old dude for whatever reason, like who am I to judge? I don't care. I just don't like it when middle age and beyond men are like, it shows me something terrible about their character if they can only date teenagers. Like that's just it's a very gross thing to do. Yeah, see Betty White, Dolly Parton, a few other folks in that era, they've just like, you can tell that they spent their whole lives being engaged, right? They at no point did they just say like, I've learned enough, I'm done, and just sort of try to dig their heels in and stay as whatever they were before, right? And I think that the Betty White that was in The Proposal, for example, was probably very different from the Betty White that was in Golden Girls, because she had continued to learn and evolve and become a different version of herself every time she was learning something. And Dolly Parton is a great example of somebody who's just sort of embraced, like, can I do the most good for the most people? Like, I don't know, maybe we'll find out someday that Dolly Parton is secretly terrible, but it's from all outside appearances, she seems to be like a genuine angel. Right. And I think that happens because she stays curious. And, you know, the issues that she's backing are issues that would have been a no-brainer automatic no when she was younger. And so I think that shows that she's willing to like engage and think and grow and kind of change a point of view based on what the information is. And instead of saying like, well, in my day, we didn't do that. And I think that's really, yeah, I know it's possible, right? I know a lot of people who didn't get stuck in their ways. And I think that people that are very visible, like Betty White and Dolly Parton, et cetera, are great examples of people publicly doing that. But I do think it's sort of against our standard urges to sort of just like get over it. When did I first discover the web? Let's see, what year would this have been? 1998, 99, something like that. When did Eminem's first album come out? It was what was it, the Slim Shady LP? Yeah, he dropped the Slim Shady LP in 99. Okay, so it would have been 99, because my first experience of the internet was getting online on my parents' in my living room in my parents' house. There was one computer. It was like the house computer, and we had the dial-up internet, so it made the whole modem sound and everything, and which was really funny because I would try to get on the internet late at night because it was like, it was like everybody gone to sleep. I wanted to stay up all night fighting with this is so embarrassing. I would get on the Eminem forum and I would argue with Insane Clown Posse fans about which band was better. Which is just what a time to be alive. But anyways, I wanted to do this for longer periods of time than my parents would let me do within their rules. And so I would like sneak out of my room at night, and then I would have to like grab blankets and pillows and like wrap them around the computer so that when the modems went off, it didn't wake up my parents. And then and then I would argue with strangers on the internet about which white rapper was better. And so anyways, that was my first experience of the internet. When I really got into the internet, I would say I started customizing MySpace pages. That's where I like learned how any of this stuff worked. And then where I learned web dev was in a band. I'd kind of like started learning by customizing the MySpace page for the band, but then I wanted to be able to do more. Like I learned Flash so that I could put music on the internet without people being able to easily download it. I learned PHP and MySQL so that the bandmates I built like a little shitty CMS so that the bandmates could post tour dates, which they absolutely never did. I had to do it all myself. I like kept learning different little things so that I could do more with the band's website. And at the end of my band days, I had built enough of a skill set that I was able to more or less immediately pivot into running an agency, because I kind of realized I'd been running an agency for my band. I was an agency with one client because I was doing design, I was doing merch, I was doing web dev, I was doing promotion, booking, sales, all that stuff. I was like, oh, I could just use this skill set and do it for other people. And it turns out that ended up working out pretty well for me. How's the Leet Heat game engine coming along? It is, I think, as of the most recent episodes we did, I'm pretty happy with it. There are a few like little polished things that I could think of, but I'm also not confident yet that we're going to make a season 2 of Leet Heat. So I want to see how it continues to perform, and I want to see whether or not people are really into it. Because I love that show. Like, I think it's so much fun. I think the people who were on it had so much fun. But we need to make sure that it's got an audience and that it is, if we keep making it, are people going to watch it? Do people, are people willing to become supporters to keep Leet Heat going? Like lots of questions. And I'm trying to be more pragmatic about this stuff, because some of this stuff I do just because it's really fun. Like this particular show doesn't make me any money. I do it because I like hanging out with y'all, and I expect that to continue to be the case. Other things like Leet Heat is very expensive and very stressful. And if I don't get the audience, then we won't get the sponsors, which means that I won't be able to afford to do it unless we pull in a ton of viewer support. And that, is just sort of like an ongoing challenge with any of this stuff. But the game engine itself, I think, is in reasonably good shape. There were a couple things that I wanted, like I don't have the ability to send a temporary, like if somebody gets something wrong, I thought it would be fun to be able to put like a big X on their podium screen, or little things like that. Some improvements around how the questions themselves are scaled based on how long they are. But really the biggest challenge with Leet Heat is just getting questions. Like each episode needed 40 questions. No, more. 80 questions. And that's just a lot of questions. That's not right. How many? 5 times 5 categories, 4 questions a category. So that's 20, 40 questions. But it's still like 40 questions is a lot of questions. Like when you're making 12 episodes and you realize, okay, so 12 episodes times 40 questions, now you got 480 questions that you need. And those 480 questions, of those, a fifth of them are all about CSS. And I don't know if I have, what is that? Like almost 100 CSS questions in me. like, I'm sure, like, we did it, right? But holy shit, that is a lot of questions about CSS. And so the process of getting those questions was a lot. Let's see. Here from LinkedIn. What's up? Welcome. If I was starting a programming career, like doing front end or full stack, what are things I would do differently and things I would probably avoid? I would avoid. So the things that I did well, I think, is I've spent my whole career trying to build things from scratch, and I think that helped me become a pretty skilled dev pretty fast. Like I built my own CMS because I mean this is one of the things that I would try to let go of earlier, but I believed I could build a better WordPress. And so I was building my own, and I put some clients on that. And the process of doing that taught me so much. It's how I learned about like preventing SQL injection and doing different security stuff and how auth worked and a whole bunch of things like that. I re-implemented, not for work, but just as a curiosity. I wanted to understand how the Flux architecture worked, which Flux is a state management thing that React offered up as a pattern that was kind of the precursor to Redux. And so I looked at the way that they'd implemented that, and I sort of like rebuilt it myself to understand how is this data moving through, what's going on there. I've done like, built e-commerce sites, and I've built payment processing. I've built AST transformations. I've built plugins for Babel and for Webpack, and now for Vite and ESBuild, and like going through and figuring out how all this stuff works and why it does what it does. All of that has been just so incredibly helpful to me, because then when I get into trouble, I never feel like I am facing magic. And I think that a lot of when I was early in my career, I remember one of the biggest frustrations that I had is I was constantly faced with this sort of knowledge that I know this is possible, but I don't even know where to start figuring out how it works. And so you'd end up with these sort of like known unknowns. I know that I've seen somebody do this thing, but I don't know what it's called. I don't know what the technique is. I don't know what programming language they used. I don't know if it's programming at all or if it's something else, like they have an animation library or it's a video or something, but like I don't even know how to figure that out. And because of that, it was sort of like looking at this thing. You could clearly see it. You can almost reach it, but then you there's 1,000 doors and you don't know which door goes to it. So you just have to start trying doors. Everything takes a million years. So one of the things that consistently reverse engineering and like figuring out how stuff works has done for me is it's given me the ability to far less often hit that scenario where I know it's possible, but I don't even know where to start. Usually I have a couple threads to tug at, and it's because I've done a little bit of everything. And so if somebody says like, oh, we're going to do this animation thing, I can go, oh, okay, I know enough about animation that I can kind of dig into, like, is this a web animation? Is this a JavaScript animation? Are we getting into CSS animations? Are we doing something like Lua? Like, I know what they are. I don't necessarily, I couldn't tell you anything about a non-CSS or JavaScript animation, but I do know that they exist, and I can start to differentiate between them. I can really quickly determine, is this being done with CSS? Like I can just very quickly, I've done enough of it that I can say yes or no. Same with JavaScript. I can usually figure out, like, is this, before I even get into the dev tools. And then there's other stuff that I can see, and I'm like, okay, well, I've already eliminated a bunch of things that it's not. So I have a few more options that we can try. So it makes learning faster, right? So build everything, do things the hard way. But then the flip side of that, and the thing I wish I would have done less of, is believing that I'm somehow magical and like gonna figure out something that nobody else has figured out before. Because a lot of the time when I was younger, I would build this stuff not because I wanted, like, I did want to see how it worked, but I also had this hubris of like, I'm going to figure this out in a way that nobody else has ever figured out, and my solution will defeat all of the other solutions, and I will become the new WordPress, or I will become the new whatever thing it was that I was building. And I think that that belief really limited me because it made me unwilling to use other tech because I felt like I could build better versions of everything. And so I was really hesitant to adopt anything really. Like I tried to make vanilla versions of literally every single thing because I felt like I had some magical power to like be the best at everything. Um, and I think that part of like that served me in certain ways because it didn't let me settle for good enough in a lot of cases where I think I could have settled for good enough, and it forced me to do things in a much more I did it the hard way. And doing it the hard way taught me what the hard way is and why I didn't want to do the hard way. So maybe this is a lesson that you just can't like shortcut, but I I personally think I could have spent probably 5 less years believing that I could rebuild everything better. And just learning that like I should be reverse engineering these tools, but I should be using the tools at work and not turning everything into a like a full rebuild or a full custom thing or a whatever. And now, like longer into my career, I've worked with people who still believe that they can build a better version of everything or that anything they work on can be improved if they just like, take what they've learned from the tool and like rebuild a custom version that's fine-tuned for our use case. And what I realize is that type of approach is this is how we get like legacy code, and this is how we get bottlenecks, and this is how we get people who never get time off because they've touched literally every portion of the code and they're the only one who understands it because it's all bespoke. And so they get paged, every hour and a half constantly because something is broken and way too many people depend on that. So learning to leverage tools, but then understand how those tools work is probably the biggest change I would make, rather than like fighting all the tools and believing I could make my own versions. And then I think I would spend more time at meetups and like making friends and trying to pair program. One of the things that I did really late in my career, um, I had been working in this industry for almost 10 years before I got the first job where I was really pair programming with somebody. And the amount of growth from like 2000, let's see, when did I really start this? 2007, I would say, was when like the band broke up and I was working full time as an engineer. I think I started coding in around 2003 or so. From 2007 to 2014 was when I was doing my agency stuff. And I was fully remote. I was mostly solo. I had contractors, but we worked on different projects. We didn't work together. So when I went to IBM in 2007 to 2015, and then 2016 I went to IBM. And when I went to IBM in 2016, I immediately I was working with other people, we were pairing, we were doing code reviews, and the speed with which I leveled up was kind of startling, honestly, because I was like, I've been doing this for 10 years. Like, what am I going to learn, right? I'm going in as a senior. I'm going to go there, be a senior, and it's going to be a good paycheck, and I'm just glad I don't have to be in charge anymore. That was kind of my reasoning. And then I showed up and I was like working with these engineers, and they, ostensibly I was one of the more experienced people on the team, but practically everybody there had something they knew better than I did. Like some of these kids had come out of computer science degrees, and some of these were really seasoned, like corporate types. Like they'd been working in big tech for their entire careers, and they just knew stuff that I never even considered. Like they knew things about how a very large enterprise system functions that to me, I was working on agency projects. The biggest thing I ever worked on had like 10 engineers working on it, right? And so this idea of moving into a company that had more employees than the country of Lithuania was like, of course I'm not experienced there. Like, of course I'm not going to come in and just know stuff. And the pairing and the working with other people made such an enormous difference in how quickly I was able to level up. And it also just, it's friendships. Like none of the folks, a couple of the folks that I worked with at IBM are like friends, like we keep in touch. We go visit each other. Most of the people I would say are like professional acquaintances. And what I mean by that is if they came to town, I'm going to go out of my way to meet them for a drink. If I go to their town, I'm going to let them know I'm there, and hopefully we'll meet up for something. And if they reached out to me and asked me if I knew anybody who was hiring, I would make an effort to try to find somebody to connect them with, right? And they would do the same for me. And that's been enormously helpful because every time I go to a company, it just kind of expands the number of people that I'm friends with, that I'm connected with, that know what I'm capable of and what I enjoy, and they can, you know, tell people who I don't know that they should reach out to me, right? And I get people coming into my inbox who will say, "Oh, I heard about you from," and then they'll list somebody that I worked with 5 years ago who has been, you know, casually following me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, they said that you do the thing that I'm looking for, and now I've got a lead that never would have had that lead if this person that I worked with years ago didn't just mention it to somebody else because we were friends." So I think I would work with people much sooner, as soon as possible, honestly, to try to expand my knowledge and my network earlier in my career, because you can really see too, like I went from, like, income wise, I went from 30 grand to 100 grand from 2006 or 7 ish to 2015. 2015, I made 100 grand. It was 6 figures for the first time in my life. And then when I went to IBM paid me like 140, 145, something like that, which I was like blown away by, because I didn't know you could make that kind of money. Like, I grew up in Montana, and I believed that like 6 figures was an untouchable amount of money. I was like, holy shit, who makes that much money? And so when IBM offered me that much money, it was like a couldn't believe it, right? But then since IBM, I have since gone on to like more than double that amount in the same amount of time. So the network effects have just had an exponential growth pattern on my ability to get work, on my income, on my friendships, on my so many things, right? And I it's important for me to stress that I don't think I'm an isolated incident. Like, there are so many people in my network, some of whom you've probably seen around on social media or at conferences, and a lot of whom you haven't, because they're not big social media presences and they don't speak at conferences and they don't make videos, with very similar stories where they've just been here a long time. They're cool to work with. They treat people well. They help when they can. And as a result, they're all making killer money, and they've got jobs they like on teams they enjoy. And they're super skilled because they're just surrounded by brilliant people at all times, and they're willing to learn. And I think that is one of those things that I discounted when I was younger. I just assumed I could hero it, and like, well, yeah, I'm an agency. I'll just keep, I'll keep trucking, I'll keep kicking ass, and eventually I'll be rich, like, I don't know, some other person that I imagined was a lone wolf, which I've recently really become disillusioned with the idea of lone wolves, because everybody that I think was a lone wolf is standing on a bunch of bodies of people that they basically threw under buses to pretend they were lone wolves. But anyways, yeah, that's what I would do differently. What's my take on customers and stakeholder expectations? Whoo, do we have time for this? So customers, I think, will tell you exactly what they want, and they're typically really good at telling you what they want. You don't ask them, what do you want? Because they'll start imagining and like coming up with stuff that they don't use, that they don't care about, anything like that. But if you watch somebody use a product and then you ask them what was frustrating, they immediately tell you what's missing. And if you are paying attention, if you've got a good like UX researcher, a good product person, whoever it is that's talking to customers directly, it can be a developer, maybe it should be. You can have a conversation where you watch somebody use your product. You'll immediately see the things that they struggle with, and that's already great feedback about what you should work on. And then when you start to talk to them about, okay, well, what do you enjoy about our product, and what do you find frustrating about our product? They'll start saying like, yeah, I've been trying to bring this piece in, and I can't figure out how to make it work, and that's been really struggling. And like, we have, at work, we're doing it like this, and we can't like every time I log in, it logs out the other people on the team. So that's super frustrating. And you start to just build this model of how people use the product and what they're trying to use it for, which starts to fill out the roadmap of like, okay, well, where people are actually getting value from this isn't what we thought. Like, a really good example of this would be something like, well, let me pick on Netlify because Netlify is my favorite to pick on. They built extremely good static file hosting, and the things that they had built to make that possible, you know, some of it was sort of incidental stuff like branch deploys and instant rollbacks and that kind of stuff, and some of it was very intentional. But like the things that they thought would be valuable early on in the thing, they were like, oh, it's going to be speed of deploys, it's going to be the security, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And then what they started to realize was what was actually really meaningful was the like the team's ability to rapidly get and give feedback, because they could quickly pull a branch and then deploy that branch and then share it with somebody, and they could like give feedback on an idea. Or similarly, if they, you know, if they did deploy something, it only took so speed was actually important because it only took a few seconds to deploy it versus, you know, maybe you had to wait until next Thursday to get that deploy out. And so suddenly teams were able to collaborate in a way that was really meaningful that they couldn't do with their existing CI/CD. And we started to realize like, oh, wait, the value of this tool isn't actually the tech part of it, it's the collaboration part of it. And so then we started thinking, and we had, you know, Marissa Morby, who is also my wife, but came in as she joined Netlify before I did, and we kind of noticed like, hey, the thing that people really want here is like discussion. And so Netlify built deploy preview commenting. She kind of prototyped it out, and it ended up being so successful that they acquired a company that was doing that really well and shipped the ability. And if you use Netlify, maybe you never knew this existed, but it's a really cool feature. You can, on a deploy preview, you can enable like an overlay, and that overlay allows you to like comment on things and screenshot and annotate and do stuff that will then let you basically leave feedback on a PR. If you're not a developer, you can log in and say, as the designer, like, hey, it looks like you used the wrong colors here. Here's a screenshot. Here's an arrow pointing to the thing I'm talking about. And then that gets posted on the GitHub PR, and you get like their browser and what version of Chrome they're using and all this kind of stuff, right? So really interesting stuff that was not really the original point. But once that got added, all of a sudden, like business and enterprise sales started going up because we were starting to solve problems that real customers had. And that happened because Marissa joined the company and started talking to customers and understanding what it was that they were trying to do, and then listened when they talked about their frustrations. And that turned into a roadmap. And I think that, you know, what I've seen a lot of companies do is they'll do this right once, and then they get more customer feedback and they decide that that particular thing would be very boring to work on, and they'd rather work on something fun. And so they pick a really hard technical challenge that users didn't want or care about or think was interesting, and instead they find, or they often will just ignore entirely. Or in the case of, say, edge networks, there was like this gold rush with Netlify and Vercel and a bunch of companies to build out edge networks, right? And then we've all just sort of like, you know, Vercel had to publicly roll that back and be like, just kidding, that's actually a bad idea, don't do it. And it's because nobody talked to their users, and instead we were just playing this like technical game of like, can we solve this really hard problem? It's really fun to solve really hard problems. And we built out these really complicated solutions to non-existent problems. And then it turns out that they created problems that we didn't have before that frustrated users. And so then we had to create new guidance to solve the new problems that we'd created by doing something that nobody asked for. Like, this is a very common story in tech, and I'm picking on one that I'm close to, but like over and over and over again, we can see this happening in companies where they solve a problem that you just don't like, how did they even get there, right? And it's because they're not talking to their users. Stakeholders, on the other hand, I think are often a key driver of terrible decisions, because they, you know, if I'm a And I think, are we talking about like board members, or are we talking about like stakeholders like the head of product? Because an internal stakeholder like a leader or an executive, they tend to do things that are fun for them or good for their team, and a lot of times will do that without any consideration of what happens next, right? Um, and so, you know, if a leader, like an internal stakeholder, is saying like, I want to build this thing because my team needs a way to do XYZ, and you're like, okay, great, then what happens? They don't have an answer. Then it's time to start pushing back, right? And this is the part that's really hard, because everybody says we want to be data driven, and everybody wants to be data driven until they have an idea, and then they don't want to have to prove that they need data to do that idea. They just want to do it because they think it's cool. And I don't know how you overcome this, because a lot of times the people who are making the worst decisions are like the CEOs, because there's this really interesting phenomenon that happens where when a founder starts a company, usually, like the ones that I've seen succeed really well, they start by solving a problem that they have. Like, I am a developer. I am working on this particular type of thing. It sucks because of X. So I then build a solution to X, and it's so good that I start a company based off of it, right? Very common story for the way that tech startups work. But then things starts to grow, right? And now that CEO is no longer the developer that they were building for at the beginning. They are now the CEO of a tech company. And a CEO of a tech company is not building websites that would utilize their tool. They are building their tool, which means that their point of view is steadily shifting toward, what does a SaaS owner need, right? What does a software platform need? And so their solutions start to get really detached from what customers want. And then you start to see this shift where their instincts were really, really good at the beginning of the company because they had solved a problem that they had. My experience dictates that X is a problem and I can solve X, and I have, and people want to pay for that. Look at how good my instincts are. People invest, people praise their instincts, talk about how capable they are. And then as the company grows, as they get more removed from the solution, they start becoming the owner of a tech tool instead of the actual developer that they were building for. Their instincts aren't good anymore, because their instincts are to solve problems that they have, not to solve problems that their users have. But we don't know how to transition a CEO, or a founder, I guess, into a CEO role, because founders are close to the problem. They're very plugged into what their users want, because they basically are their users. That's why VCs love a dev founder. But however, if the founder shift to CEO doesn't come with a heavy shift toward, we need to listen to our users, then we basically have a CEO who is no longer the target user, operating based on gut instinct, which is no longer informed by practical experience. So it becomes increasingly bad. And that CEO is now solving problems that most likely don't exist, or that exist for his company, not for the companies that pay for his company, right? And I guess I shouldn't gender that term, but every time I've seen it done, it was a dude. The challenge then becomes, how do we convince stakeholders to recognize that they are not the person that pays for their service, and therefore the things that they want no longer matter? And if you think about it in another way, typically speaking, an expert won't pay somebody to do work that they can do themselves. If you are a developer and somebody offers you a paid solution to build a website for you, a Webflow or a Wix or whatever, you're not going to pay for it. You're not their target audience. You are clearly not the person who would build that thing. And so if a developer is in, like, you know, let's take Wix as an example. If you are the CEO of Wix and you're a developer and you are not paying attention, you're building the platform of Wix, you're not talking to your customers, you might start to think that what Wix is really missing is a like robust developer community that gets developers excited about building with Wix. And you might start building features that are specifically for Wix to be used by developers. And all along the way, you are now driving out the core users who are paying for your service, which are people who can't afford developers and don't know how to build websites, who just needed a website they could customize and build on their own, right? And so as you, as the CEO, are following your instincts, which are what would make me want to use this platform, which is a terrible question to ask, you are now building something that is actively driving out your core user base and is making it something that nobody wants, because developers still don't want a tool that will write the code for them, because we like writing code. And now the average user can't use it anymore because it expects you to write code because it's being marketed toward developers. So you sort of, your instincts get increasingly worse the more successful your company becomes. And so you have to rely on customer feedback. It has to be driven by what the customers actually want. Who pays me money? What are they dealing with, right? And if you aren't doing that, then you're going to see an inevitable drift away from what your product's value is to the people who pay for it. And then board members, I mean, I think the thing to remember about board members is that generally speaking, a board member is somebody who got lucky, because most companies don't exit because they are excellent companies. They exit because they were right place, right time. And the people who exit with it are the people who were employed there at the time that they exited. It's very rare that like a leader at a company started the company, built the company, takes it through exit, and is able to repeat that multiple times. Like, almost always you have somebody who got lucky once, they made a bunch of money, and now they don't have like a real job, so they just advise other companies, and that makes them into board members. So you've got somebody with a lot of survivorship bias telling you what they did as if it's what everybody should do. So generally speaking, an external stakeholder is going to give you advice that you should by default ignore. Not in a way that's like offensive to them, but in a general sense, they're going to tell you what they did. And you should try to understand which parts of that are still relevant today, and if any of it, and which parts of it were, well, yes, in, 2003, during whatever exit you were doing, you're correct that the market worked that way. But now literally every company is already doing that. And so trying to do that is not a differentiator anymore, right? That's a really common problem that you'll have when you talk to board members. The other problem with board members is that they all want to put their friends in, because again, networks, they all want to put their friends into leadership roles. And so they bring in their like pet executives and try to force them into their startups that they advise. And that is, in almost every case I've seen, a recipe for disaster, because you're trying to force somebody who did a different thing into a thing that's not really relevant to their skill set because they're your buddy. And then it, when it fails, you also start to see some really serious shenanigans to try to like save face, which I hate. Anyways, that I get pretty salty about that part. But as a general rule, I think, if you're a company that succeeds is going to be the company that's actually talking to customers, and what the customers say should be used as a club to beat down any stakeholders who would kind of try to vibe or instinct their way through what a roadmap should be. And if you're at a company and you have customer data and it's being ignored by stakeholders, I don't know, prep your resume. Because like at the end of the day, like, it is very, very rare that I've seen somebody take a company and turn it into a different company and succeed. Like, usually you start a company and that company is good for what it was good for. And if you don't continue to serve those users, like, how do you build a second audience, right? Like, it's that idea of, you've told everybody what you are. You have won the pie eating contest. People are paying you for this. They want you to do more of this. And you're saying, just kidding, we want a different audience. We're pivoting. We're a different thing now. And then all those people who were paying you happily go, oh, I guess this isn't for me now. And they leave. And now you've got to win an entirely different market. Why on earth would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. So anyways, yeah, very salty about a lot of things in that space. But yeah. Obviously, ICP, it's not better than anyone. Let's see. Yeah, the $5 doesn't cover the whole budget. It honestly does help. Like, this stuff is all very expensive, and I appreciate it. And it truly, like, literally every time I get a note that somebody's subscription came through, it's like the highlight of my day. So thank you all very much. Are software developers naturally self-reflective, and do they tend to have this personality? How do they manage overthinking while trying to write perfect code? Are developers naturally self-reflective? In what sense? Like, because this is a great question. I would say generally that a lot of the developers I have worked with are not. So let me scratch that. As a general rule, I don't think people are particularly self-reflective. I think that it is very uncomfortable to examine things from a standpoint of what if I'm wrong, which is kind of the core question you have to ask to do self-reflection. And the willingness to say, oh, this was me, like I did this, I made this bad, is a prerequisite that I think a lot of people never quite get to, where they, because their default is to say it would have worked if it wasn't for thing, external factor, other person, better circumstances, timing, whatever. And so, and the alternative to that too is that willingness to own things in a constructive way. Like if something goes wrong and you say, I'm a piece of shit, this is why I never try anything. Like also, you're not self-reflecting, you're just self-flagellating, and that's not productive. It's not going to change anything. So I think that the trend that I have seen is that the people who tend to succeed in a sustainable fashion are largely self-reflective. And when I say succeed, you have to caveat this, because I don't mean succeed in like the wildly rich sense, because I don't think self-reflective people can become billionaires. Like I think somebody self-reflective would very quickly realize the choices that have to be made if you examine like the path that somebody like Elon Musk took to become as rich as he is. It is a lot of things that required basically choosing to be a terrible person because it was okay in the service of becoming the richest person in the world. So I think when I say successful, what I mean by successful is somebody who actually likes their life and has enough money to live not just comfortably, but live well, and who is, part of a network of friends that support them and is generally happy and healthy in all the ways that matter. I think that tends to be overwhelmingly self-reflective people. And the reason I think that is that I think a healthy balance is what's important to have a life that you feel good about on all fronts. Because, if you go 100% on one pillar of your life, you can go further on that pillar. So if you decide that the thing you care about the most is maximizing income, you can put in the extra hours, you can get the second job, you can do whatever the thing, grind on the weekends to build your side project. All of those things will move toward income, but they come at the expense of your relationships, potentially at the expense of your health, probably at the expense of your general sense of happiness and fulfillment. And so you can grow one pillar at a rapid pace, but you generally can't grow all of them. And so you find yourself in a situation where self-reflection requires you to understand which parts are meaningful to you, right? And how do you get that balance in a place where it's okay that you're not making the most money, you're making enough money, and it's okay that you're not necessarily spending every minute with your family, because you are spending a good amount of time with your family. And it's okay that you aren't like, ripped to shreds like a Hollywood actor during their shirtless shoot. You are just healthy enough that it doesn't hurt when you stand up and sit down, and when you get up in bed, get up in the morning, you're not dealing with aches and pains. You feel like you can move in your body. And I think that those are choices that they require self-reflection, because you have to necessarily make trade-offs and admit where you're not doing well, and make a decision that like this choice was maybe the right choice before, but it's not the right choice now. And that sort of adjustment is necessary and ongoing. And I think that for a lot of folks, that isn't necessarily a it's not a comfortable place to be, right? We want to believe that we're correct, and we want to believe that we're acting in our best interests, and that when we make mistakes, those mistakes were caused by external forces or bad luck, and that can be true. But like at the same time, if you never examine, what was the source of the bad luck? Like, was the source of the bad luck that you got struck by lightning? Cool. Like, it kind of is what it is. But also, hey, how do people get struck by lightning? Well, they're in high places during storms, generally speaking. Like, it's pretty rare that somebody is like, safely inside their house and the lightning skips all of the trees around them and just goes directly for their head. It's like there sometimes it's like, okay, can I keep myself out of situations where I get in trouble? Like, I think a really big one is, like people will talk about like the health of their relationships and stuff. And if you've got no drama in your life, it's like, well, have you put yourself in an environment where drama is hard to create? Like if you are worried about, I don't know, if you like something like even something simple like infidelity. Like if you don't want to be somebody who is in a relationship with infidelity, just don't create situations where it's possible, like don't like, it's kind of like the whole like, oh, well, I was hanging out with my ex and we went back to my place because it was too far to go home. And it's like, well, okay, you've just created a situation where, sure, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to do something bad, but you've put like all of the pieces in place for the worst outcome, right? So just don't do that. Like, make a different choice, pay for the taxi to get them home, or like, let them stay at your place and leave and go to your partner's place. Whatever it is, like, you can be a good person without putting yourself in like a morally tenuous or dangerous situation. And I think that the same thing is true about a lot of, like, we talk about our bad luck, we talk about our other people doing stuff, and some of it is like, okay, what choices am I making? Like, what situations am I putting myself in? Who am I surrounding myself with? Am I really giving myself the best shot at the life that I want? And those aren't comfortable conversations, especially if you're like far along and like situations are tough and complicated. Like, when I was younger, I was in a relationship that it was good. It was good. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't right for me. But it was really hard to imagine like any world where I wasn't just being a complete dick by ending that relationship, because there was nothing wrong. But neither one of us was happy either, right? Like, we had just sort of kind of settled into this routine where we were together and we were fine and we got along and we didn't really fight, but we like also didn't see eye to eye on stuff. And it just, we were always just sort of like, we were okay. We had like compromised. And it would have been really, really easy for me to say, to like not be self-reflective on that. And she did the work too of like doing some self-reflection, and we decided that it would be better to make the hard choice than to make the easy choice and like not change. And I think that those sorts of decisions I have found myself in positions where I feel like it's not just one decision, right? It's not like I have one thing in my way. I have 3 jobs, so I don't have the energy to work on my side project, which means I don't have any extra income, and all of my jobs are bad. And also I'm in a relationship that I'm not happy in. And also I'm too far away from my parents. And so I feel guilty about the fact that I never see them. And also one of my good friends is actually like super like negative toward me and like treats everything I do as bad. Like, I've been in those situations where it was kind of like the whole deck was stacked against me. It felt like everything I was doing was in some small way counterproductive to the life that I felt like I wanted to lead. And I mean, it took me years, literally years, many years, to slowly change the way that I like acted in those scenarios and the way that I was like participating in those scenarios. And I had to draw boundaries with my friend that was kind of negative toward me. And like in a couple cases, the friends that I was having issues with like grew with me, and we got really close because of those confrontations. And in a couple cases, those friends drifted away, and they, we don't talk anymore, and that's okay. Right. But I think that, I mean, this is so much further beyond what you actually asked, but I think to me, what I've noticed is that the willingness to sort of examine things as, is, am I making choices that are making this harder for me? And that can be as simple as like in my software. Like, did I originally decided that I wanted to use Next.js, and now I am looking at this app and I am not happy in my job. I feel frustrated all the time. Now, could I say the fault is with Next.js? Sure. And there was a lot of good arguments for why you could make that case, right? Also, maybe I just chose the wrong tech for this project. It doesn't mean that Next.js is bad. It just means that it's not what you should have chosen. And then can you assess that from like, what did I do that led me to like jump to the conclusion that I should be using Next.js? What could I have done differently? What questions should I have asked? How could I have thought about this project in a way that would have let me identify this before I made that decision, so that I didn't have to back out of it later? That makes a great software engineer. And I think that expanding that to just kind of think of the same with relationships. Like, I just had a really rough meeting with my manager, and instead of saying my manager's a dick, what scenarios could be at play here? And like, are there things that I can control that would potentially make this relationship better with my manager going forward? Are there, do I have options? And I mean, honestly, sometimes the answer is no. I've had coworkers where the only answer was to just, we could not be in the same team, and honestly, not really even in the same company. And that's okay. Like, sometimes there are people who are just fundamentally incompatible, and sometimes you really do just get like a bad actor. And but it's rare. I've had 2 truly bad actors in my entire career. Everybody else just had different motivations and different things that they were afraid of and different things that they were worried about. And we weren't like compatible in that way. So we just had to move to different teams where they could run things the way they wanted to run them. I could work on things in a way that didn't make me feel like I was fighting with this person all the time. And we just continued, right? As long as we weren't working together, we got along just fine. And I think that it wouldn't have worked out if I had just said, well, this person sucks, you need to get rid of him. Like, I had to acknowledge my part in this, and like where I was inflexible and where I was antagonizing, the things that they were into, and so on and so forth, so that I was making them feel more unsafe because I was kind of attacking the things that they thought were really important, and telling them that like, no, I'm going to get rid of all of that and turn it into an open source library because it's not important. And they were like, but that's literally all I work on. They're going to fire me if you get rid of that. Like, I don't know. It's very difficult it's such a nuanced thing, right? So I feel like I could keep talking about it, but I feel like I'm starting to go in circles, so I'm going to stop. What sort of change have I seen this year in coding? Like, back then and now? I mean, from last year to now, I haven't seen a huge change. I think the biggest change that's visible is that everybody's talking about AI, but we've seen this cycle before. Like, there were literally articles that ran, I think, in like the mid 2010s, where people were talking about how like all the engineers are going to get replaced by computers. And it's we go in cycles. We're always looking for something scary to talk about. But generally speaking, I think the trick is to recognize that, like, the way that we built software in, I don't know, 1980 isn't that different from the way we built software in 2000. Isn't that different from 2025? Like, at the end of the day, we're solving problems using computers, and the problems will continue to exist, and the way that people interface with the computers will shift, but they won't shift that much. Like, people are still writing COBOL today. People are still working in PHP 5 projects, and people are still using like Angular 1 in projects. Like, there's work out there for whatever you're doing, right? And there will always be something new, and there will always be somebody telling you that if you don't learn the new thing right now, you'll be obsolete by next year. And it hasn't been true for the entire lifespan of computers. And I think that if you are somebody who's constantly learning and curious, and just kind of keeping your eye out, trying stuff, learning more, figuring out how things work. It doesn't matter if like JavaScript goes away tomorrow. You can learn the new thing because you've learned how to learn. It's not like, you know, you haven't put all your eggs in one basket. You've put the eggs in the basket of I can make computers cooperate. And we are not getting rid of computers. And even if we get rid of certain programming languages, new ones will emerge because nobody can vibe code their way through government software. Nobody can vibe code their way through like guidance systems and GPS. Like it has to be right. It has to pass regulations. It has to be completely 100% deterministic because we can't have it randomly deciding like, why don't you drive your own car today? And then it just lets somebody die. Like AI is not taking the jobs. AI will augment the jobs. It'll change the landscape, but it's not taking anything away. Directly talking about Arc, I do think Arc is a good case of that. They had something great. They couldn't figure out how to do the VC hyperscale, and so they do silly stuff. You know, you're looking for something that can get you 1,000x return or a 10,000x return instead of realizing that you had something that probably would have paid everybody's salary for the rest of their lives very comfortably if you didn't have to pay back a VC that wants a, you know, a giant multiple on the money they gave you. This is like, I have such a hard time with VC in general because it's really, really hard for, it is very challenging for me to imagine that like a company that's growing 2x a year should be panicking. You know what I mean? Like this was something that happened at Netlify where like we were growing, we had tripled for a couple of years and then we were doubling and we like think we had the last year I was there, like I probably shouldn't share exact numbers, so I won't, but significant growth, right? Like significant growth. And we started getting just beat up by the investors and the board. They were like, you are not growing fast enough. This is not, it was like, we are making so much money. Like this company is so successful. Just chill. Like just chill. Stop making us hire people. Stop trying to invent new tech and just focus on this business. And we're all going to have like consistent good income for the rest of our lives. And it just wasn't good enough. So, you know, this company gets basically turned upside down because it wasn't 3xing or whatever it was they were expecting it to do. And I just think it's just a bummer to me because it's how many great companies died because they didn't have a 1,000x multiple in the future. But it would have been so good to just have it forever. And like the 10 people that worked there could have continued to make it a little bit better. And we all would have continued to pay our $10 a month. And everybody who worked there would have been able to make 6 figures and live comfortably for their entire careers. But no, it had to be worth billions. So we had to kill it. It just sucks. Like, I don't know. I long for a world where lifestyle businesses aren't seen as a failure. I am on other platforms. Also, what's up, Jeffy? I'm YouTube now. I'm under CodeTV. The rebrand has taken place. The enterprise pivot, I think, is one of the things where, you know, early on, it's kind of like there's rounds of funding, and early on there's no supervision. Like the goal is grow, and growth is awareness, and it's community love, and it's all these things. And that's why early stage companies are like, you know, free tiers and cool developer events, and they're like paying attention to us and they really care. And then they hit a certain round of funding and they do a planet scale and they just decide like, well, we like you and all, but not enough to like give you money. And also we're going to take away all the free things because they don't make us money. And also we're going to stop talking to you more or less entirely because you don't make us money. And that, like, that's fine. It's a choice you can make. And I think in Planet Scale's case, it might've been exactly the right choice. But it's like a standard path for a lot of startups where, you know, they get through like the A round and everything's fine and all money is free and everything's good. And then they get the B round and suddenly there's a lot more people in that boardroom who are saying like, you need to put some money back in my pocket right now. And I think that just changes dynamics and it causes everybody to say like, okay, well, how do we make more money? And typically the way to make more money is enterprise because I got to charge a lot of people $5 a month to make money. But if I can get one company to pay me $100,000 a year, well, that's an enterprise deal, and that works out pretty well. But then to get that $100,000 a year deal, we got to start making things that company would be willing to pay $100,000 a year for, which means all of our resources get pulled off of community stuff and toward enterprise features, which means that we start losing sight of what an average developer wants, which completely changes the nature of the company, and then we end up where most of these companies end up. What's up, Elliot? How you doing? Yeah, I mean, like, I think if I have like one core thesis with CodeTV and with all the work that I do, I just want us to start thinking about code as being like it is a fun way to make a great living, and you don't have to know it all or do it all or understand it all. You can make a good living with any one of the many niches that exist in code. And if you are a curious person and you're having fun and you're building stuff and you're making friends, you have a very resilient career, right? You'll survive the shift. I survived the shift from table-based layouts to CSS. I survived the shift from Flash and ActionScript through to JavaScript. I survived the shift of like the WordPress era to the single page app and React era. Survived the shift of Jamstack to SSR. Like, it doesn't matter. None of this stuff, it's like the internet is the internet. We're going to have it for hopefully a long time, right? And people will need things to happen on their computers, and what we need will change. And the way that we build will change, but it's all built on a similar set of fundamentals, and those can't shift that fast. Because even if the AI decides it's going to run everything, our computers still run on HTML and CSS and JavaScript in the browser. And for us to access the internet, those things need to continue to work. Now, we can eventually, slowly, over the course of many, many years, introduce new programming languages that could potentially overtake and replace HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it's not going to happen fast. And we're going to get a lot of telegraphing that it's coming because all these browser companies are going to tell us, oh yeah, we're actually switching over to all WASM everything, right? We're going to know for a while, and they don't break backward compatibility. So we'll still be able to build HTML and CSS and JavaScript unless something truly unprecedented happens. And while that's not ruled out, it's just not really in the nature of how most industries work, right? Like sure, there have been, the Industrial Revolution or whatever, where things like really shifted, but all those people, most of them, ended up finding another way to work. And there's another job that will work for us, and our skill sets will transfer. And it's very rare that you find yourself as, somebody who can only do one. Well, I hope that you are not somebody who can only do one very narrow thing. And if you have to step anywhere outside of that, you feel completely helpless. Like, the skills that we're building are fairly resilient. And if you're good at working on a team, if you're good at collaborating, if you're good at understanding what people want, you could leave tech entirely and go work as a retail store manager, or as a restaurant manager, or as a bank. You could go work in a bank. You could go work in so many places doing things that aren't tech at all, but they would still use a ton of the skills that you've learned building for tech and working on teams and functioning inside of companies, right? The thing that I think is really frustrating to me is that we act like change is dangerous, or that change will prevent us from having things that we already have. And I think the way to look at it that I prefer is to look at change as like an opportunity for abundance. Like, if more people can program, that means that it's more important that computers are available and used, and that people who can do more advanced things with computers will become more valuable, honestly. Um, and if we are willing to keep learning and to understand how things are shifting, and we have some fun paying, like, just keep up on it a little bit. You don't have to know it all. Just keep up a little bit. Like, that's why Learn with Jason exists, is 90 minutes every Thursday to learn a little bit about something new. And if that little bit of information isn't enough to go get a job on it, but it is enough to at least not be surprised by what it is or what it does. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. You can watch my show. You can do your own version of the show. Lots of people have started their own, like, Learn with Their Name show. Um, or you can just do a little project over the weekend to try something out and see how it functions. But at the end of the day, resilience is one of those things that you build. And if you spend time on it, and you recognize that, like, change is inevitable, and it doesn't have to be scary. It can actually be really fun, right? Like it's kind of boring to do the same thing every day. So if change is happening and we get to keep learning and we get to apply some new skills, and like the stuff we're doing today is going to maybe look nothing like the stuff that we're doing in 10 years. I kind of find that exciting. That's fun, right? I'm still going to have my friends, still going to be building stuff, still going to be goofing around with computers. So what's to be afraid of? I just keep learning, keep trying stuff, and it's going to work out. Let's see. How it changed from back when I started working seriously and right now. I mean, it hasn't changed that much. Like I would say like a few things have shifted. You know, I think it was a lot easier a long time ago to get business working for a small business. Like my agency was all small businesses, and that was because there weren't things like Webflow or Wix or you know, WordPress was kind of the only choice, and even WordPress required a tiny bit of technical know-how. But there weren't like super abundant options there. But you know, there also weren't things like people need a bunch of intake forms. They need their like their Instagram pages are where they run a lot of their businesses from. So like, where do they put all this other stuff? Like there's the work moves, it doesn't disappear. And I think the things that were really different for me outside of just the, you know, the raw technology, like, you know, like when I started the CSS stuff was all still very limited. It was, you know, it was all floats and clear fixes and so on, IE6 hacks. And today it doesn't feel like that at all. And I think JavaScript was kind of the same. You needed something like jQuery so that it would work across all these different browsers. And today it feels very much like you can just kind of let it rip as long as you're using like an ES build or something like that. And you know, you can write vanilla JavaScript right in the browser and generally get a pretty good cross-browser experience because they've all sort of unified around specs and standards, and they're meeting and talking and implementing things together. We've got stuff like baseline and can I use, which definitely didn't exist. So I think, you know, but the general problem is people have challenges. They want to put those challenges, they want to solve those challenges on the internet, and in order to do that, somebody has to build something for a computer that makes that possible. And that hasn't really changed. I don't think that will change for a good long while, because I just don't really see like, well, you know, there's going to be a shift like there was from TV to internet, and maybe that's like a desktop internet to mobile internet, or maybe we finally crack the code on how to do AR or augmented reality in a way that people actually enjoy. That's like usable, not like a kind of novelty experience like the big goggles. And so if that's the, you know, when that happens, it'll shift, but like we'll still be building, you know, if we're building for augmented reality, we're going to be building websites that interact with the real world in a new way, but that'll be something that we can learn. And and if it's AI stuff, we'll maybe redefine some UX. Like I think one of the things that was interesting when I was coming up is we hadn't standardized on nav patterns. The way, like where you put a navigation menu was not a foregone conclusion when I first started building for the web. And so there were big discussions and arguments about like what the right kind of navigation was, and like, was a hamburger menu good or bad? And was you know, how, like, what should that interaction look like? And people were experimenting. We had this whole discussion around what we called mystery meat navigation, which was the idea that you would do nav in a way that wasn't intuitive, so people had no idea what was going on, and they would kind of have to just like click on stuff and see what happened. Which we decided was a dark pattern, and we got to watch the emergence of just the understanding of like how dark patterns work on the web, and deceptive UX and all that stuff that people do all the time now. We got to live through the experimentation of figuring out how ads worked on the internet. And I'd say we're still in that experimentation phase, but we went from, you know, no ads really to very specific and manually placed ads to like automated ad systems that were really atrocious, to sort of centralizing on like Google AdWords. And I think the the experience around most of that was just very, but again, it was like, we were still solving the same problems. It's just the tools evolved, but not in a way that makes them feel completely foreign from what they are today. Just in, capabilities shifted, and we could do a little bit more or a little bit less, and life got a little bit easier. And now the stuff that we used to do feels so easy that it's kind of like wild to think about how hard certain things were that we used to do, like rounded corners. Holy crap! Ask somebody of a certain age how hard it was to do rounded corners, and now it's just like a one setting in CSS, right? And similarly, like a dialogue or a popover now, it's one element. It just works. You don't have to do anything. There's no JavaScript, and so many of the things that we do now used to require like really extensive workarounds. And so I would say that like web dev is in a really good position compared to where it was. Still a million things that we are being discussed in the spec, and ideas and ways that we can improve it, and things that are being done that people never really accounted for, but that are sort of like standard practice now that we should probably solve at the browser level. I would say a dialogue like popover element is one of those, a modal, and all that kind of stuff is just how we're growing. Yeah, lifestyle business like that. I mean, legitimately, like, I don't know. I don't know why we get so stoked about like absurd amounts of money. I get the status, I get there's a sort of like high score mentality, and it's fun to be. I'm sure it's fun to be like yacht rich. I can't imagine that that's a like bummer to be able to say like, oh, do you want to? I don't know. You want to like rent yachts and like take everybody we know out to the Caymans, and we can afford everybody's airfare, and like just throw a big old party, and also we'll get I don't know, Timothy Chalamet to hang out, like, because we can afford that. I imagine that's cool. Like, I imagine that is a great way to live, and I can understand why people would be attracted to that. But I guess what I don't understand is that there's this sort of unwillingness to accept anything else, and to like, I don't know. There's this study. I've talked about this a bunch on here, so you maybe heard me talking about it, but they did a study on like whether or not money can actually buy happiness, and it absolutely can, to a point. And the amounts have shifted because it's been a long time, so I don't know what they are today. But in then dollars, it was around like 75 or $80,000 was the number that could buy happiness. I bet in today's dollars it's closer to like 120. Um, but it was like after you cleared about, let's call it $120,000 a year, then you stop thinking about money, you stop worrying about bills, you start, you don't have to like bring a calculator to the grocery store, and you can sort of like let this whole layer of stress where you're worried constantly about money, that sort of falls away, and you can like live a different kind of life. And that is absolutely buying happiness, because that sort of survival stress that comes with money being a constant source of struggle and panic and stress, that is that's one of those things that, if you've got like 100% capacity for any given day, worrying about money can be like 50 to 75% of that capacity, depending on how, like, am I going to lose my house if I don't close this deal? If I don't get these extra hours at work, or if my paycheck is late, if I screw up on my groceries and I like, buy too many eggs, am I going to be like destitute? Are we going to have to like skip the car payment? And then how do we work out? You know what I mean? Like, oh, if I overdraft my account, they're going to charge me $35, and I don't have $35. So it's going to end up being one of those things where like all these other things will hit. They'll all charge me $35. And the next thing you know what I mean? Like, that sort of money stress is a terrifying place to be. It is absolutely awful. I lived for a lot of years where I was broke like that, like broke. And it taught me how to do calculator math at the grocery store, and make sure, and start thinking through like, how do I budget properly so that I can live on my $600 paycheck and not like starve and lose my house and lose my car. And but like moving to the point where I think I cleared when I did clear that number, which was I don't know, around like the end of my agency days, I think I was making enough money that I wasn't really thinking about like groceries anymore. I could just, if I needed something, I could buy it, and I didn't have to worry that like, oh God, what if I overdraft my account? Um, and that sort of changed things. But then like beyond that number, it it doesn't buy more happiness. Like it unlocks more access, which you can use to create more happiness. Like if I can, take more trips and like knock things off my bucket list, like I want to go see, I don't know, I want to visit Thailand, or I want to go see the pyramids and like the Mayan temples and stuff. Like, cool. Okay, that's a super cool thing I can do. I can use money to get there. That's a way that extra money buys happiness, but it doesn't, like, having more money in itself doesn't make you feel any better. It's sort of like a high score game. And the thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people they'll clear the number where money buys them happiness, and it's almost like they think there's a second level that they have to get to where they'll start to like enjoy it. And so they don't take advantage of the money. They don't use the money to buy experiences. They're just sort of like working. And whenever they're not working, you can kind of tell that they're starting to panic a little bit. Like I have this friend. I it's fun to give people crap sometimes, but there are several people in my life actually who are constantly in like a flurry of activity. Like they will be booked 110% at all times, no exceptions. And it's kind of like, well, why don't you take a break, right? And I remember that one of these friends at one point said, if I stop, I'm going to have to think. And I don't want to do that. And so they just stay booked, stay busy, because there's this sort of like existential dread that comes in when you realize how hard you're working, and like, is it doing what you want? Is it accomplishing what you want? What's actually important to you? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And if the only answer is richer, you're kind of putting yourself on a weird treadmill there, where you just like, all you can do is work because that's the only thing that you've set as a goal. And you don't have any tie-ins with like, what do you want your relationship with your friends to be like? What do you want your family to be like? Do you have a family? Is it a good relationship? Do your kids know who you are? Are you somebody that they enjoy having around? Or are you always like grumpy and angry because you just had a 14-hour day and you just want to be left alone? Like, all those sorts of choices, I think, make for really, they bring in that self-reflection. And I have noticed that a lot of people treat businesses as an excuse to avoid self-reflection. If I'm always making more money, then I'm obviously successful and you can't challenge me on that. And the fact that they are lonely and unhappy and not really doing the things that they consider important to them, because they honestly don't really know what's actually important to them, because they've never examined that question. And the only thing that they really have to show is the balance in their bank account for all of the things that they've done in their lives, and everything else has kind of suffered for it. That's not really some self-reflection that a lot of people want to do. And I don't know. I wish more people would approach. I wish people would approach life from like, what would I feel good about on my deathbed? And how do I get to the point where when I die, let's assume I get to die comfortable in my bed, surrounded by family, and I'm looking around and I get to have some last words. I want those last words to be, this was awesome. Because whoa, I got myself. Okay. I guess I just don't want to see people like do all this stuff because they think they have to, or because they don't want to slow down to like think. And then they get to their deathbed and they get to reflect and they go, oh my God, I didn't do anything that I thought was important. Right. It, like, we're going to die, and there's no escape from that. Like, no matter how many millions of dollars you throw at it, like, we're not built to last. So trying to run away from living, like, like putting things off. Like, I need to hit this level, I need to do this thing, I need to accomplish this before I can give myself space to live, feels like a recipe for regret. And so I think the part that's a bummer to me is, where a lifestyle business, if you can make 120 grand a year, 150 grand a year, whatever it is, and live a life where you get to go knock that bucket list thing off your trip, you get to spend nights and weekends with your family, you get to like have a recreational sports league with your friends where you do whatever the thing is. That to me is really like, that's the stuff that you want. Like, you're creating stories and experiences and memories, and it's not just like every moment was you at your desk trying to make a few more dollars. You got to leverage those dollars to like live a life, But anyways, I do think that the self-reflection and thinking is like, I think it's common in the sense that it will I think people get the urge to, like, the questions start. What I don't think is common is people being willing to sit with discomfort and to be unsure and to doubt whether or not the choices that they're making are good, and to wonder if maybe they could make different choices, because it's a ton of work. I think it's really hard to do this sort of, and I think this is the kind of stuff that it's where meditation or a lot of like a ton of philosophy books in my case, or extensive writing also in my case, that isn't really intended to do anything other than like untangle the thoughts in my brain and try to understand, like, when I do something, does it make me feel better or worse, and why? And I don't know how anybody else does that. I know people do it. I don't know what their methods are. I don't know what'll be successful for other people. But I know that for me, it's been a lot of deciding to sit and be uncomfortable and be frustrated that I don't have an answer, but willing to gnaw at that problem and come up with a hypothesis and then try to change my behavior in a way that makes me feel like I'm making positive progress, and just do constant check-ins and assessments. And when I say check-ins and assessments, I don't mean like I'm doing homework. I mean, like, I'll just kind of sit and ask myself, like, did I like what I did this last week? Am I happy? Was this a good week? And if I feel like it wasn't a good week, I'll try to think about that, and I'll say, well, okay, well, why? What was I doing? And it's the nice thing about having done that for so long is that I have a really pretty extensive list of things that I know give me energy and things that drain energy for me. And so I can tell pretty quickly when a project comes up whether or not it's going to make me feel better or worse. And that has sort of been a long running process for me of sort of assessing things that I do and building the list of like the yes and no list. And it's not complete. I still do stuff all the time where I get into it and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't like this. I'm not going to do this again. And then I just add it to the list. Like, okay, I won't take that kind of project again. Or I try something new and I'm like, man, this was a blast. How do I do more of this? And then I just see if there's a way, is there a way that somebody wants to pay me to do more of that? Can I make it official, or is it a hobby and I need to do it like in my free time? But yeah, I think, yeah, golden cages, golden handcuffs. That's a really, really big thing. You, a feeling when you have enough money that you can do more, and I think that that's true. And like, again, if you're a billionaire, you could like start solving world problems and stuff like that. But I think the I guess it's also a question of scope, right? Like, do you want to be do you like, I think that for somebody who is living to save humanity, that is very much a choice to be a martyr. Like, you're choosing to suffer on behalf of everyone else. And I think that's fine. I do think that turns into, I would say that some of what we're seeing from our current billionaire class is what happens when you get somebody really, really out of touch with humanity who believes that they're trying to save humanity. And they start to believe things like, well, if we just let all the poor people die, it increases the quality of the human race. Like, that's an absolutely unhinged thing to say out loud, but that's quite literally what they believe, right? Like the if you want to get real depressed, go read about long-termism. It's bad. Anyways, can you do more with more money? Sure. But at what point is delaying doing stuff for the sake of more money costing you more than just doing what you can with the money you have? I think that's the line that everybody needs to draw, and that's the line that nobody can draw for you. But if you don't draw it, then it continually moves into the distance, and you will find that, you can't catch the horizon. It's always out in front of you. And if what you're doing is you're saying, I want to have the most money, well, we've seen what happens when you get the most money. You're still sad and empty. So you start to think, well, maybe I need the most power. And so then you go after the most power, but then you're still sad and empty. So then what? Right. And I don't really want to find out what happens next. So I think the important thing is to recognize, like, why do I want money? Why do I want power? What is true that I feel like I've lived a good life? And a lot of times it's a lot less expensive than you think. And that to me is the important thing. Like, most of the stuff that I do that really matters a lot to me isn't ridiculously expensive. It is spending time with people. It is cooking meals with people. It is doing things that are intellectually challenging. Like, all of those are more possible because I have money. But if I had more money, they wouldn't be more possible. I guess I would be able to, like, buy more airfare for more friends who live far away, but, like, that's an incremental gain over what I'm able to do now. And so I think it's definitely not doing it now to try to make more money so that I could do more of it later, just to me feels silly. Like, I should be doing it now, right? Because I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I don't know what the quality of my life will be in 30 years. Like, if I'm, if something happens where I can't move around and I can't enjoy my life, I don't want to have spent all this time getting to a retirement that now I can't do the stuff I wanted to do because my body can't handle the stuff that I wanted to do. Like, I'm not a bungee jumper, but, like, let's say that one of my bucket list goals is to bungee jump, and I say, yeah, someday I'm going to bungee jump. I just got to do all this, make all this money first. And then you work your whole life to make as much money as you possibly can, and then you retire and you go to bungee jump and you realize, I can't. My body can't handle bungee jumping, right? That sucks. That's like you traded everything for this goal that you now can't do because you waited too long. That sucks. Don't do that. Live your life now. All right, y'all. I gotta go. I gotta go eat something. We're slightly over time. I love doing these. I hope you enjoy these. I think at the end of the day, I just want to be a philosopher. So it's very fun when we get to have these chats. Thank you all for hanging out. Thank you for asking great questions. And we will see you on, I think we got something good coming up on Thursday. What's Thursday? Oh, I don't have anything scheduled on Thursday. Oh, all right. Okay, so we don't have a show this Thursday, but we do have a new episode of Leet Heat coming out on today. I'm going to get that posted, and we are going to be starting to work on, there's another one of these next Tuesday. We've got more coming out, so just keep your eyes on CodeTV. Make sure you subscribe, leave comments on our videos, share the videos with your friends, talk about us wherever you can, because it really does make all the difference in the world. So thanks, y'all. We'll see you soon.